Nala Karich Wajak Mort, Kayan Karak Niju Walila Puja, Wejanang, Wajak Karajin, Wenyiting Bula Yeah. We have a full house tonight. No apologies or leaves of absence. I do have an application for a leave of absence, and I'm just going to remind everyone, including myself, for those travelling with us online, to speak right into the microphones as if you were about to, eat it. We have an application for leave of absence from Councillor Jones from the 26th of September to the 10th of October inclusive. So I'll move that and get a seconder for that, please. Councillor Thompson, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Do we have any other leaves of absence that people would like to apply for? We do not. Excellent. Do we have disclosures of interest by members? Councillor Graham, you've notified me of one.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm a full member of the Fremantle Bowling Club, which makes me an automatic full member of the Fremantle Park Centre, item 2308-4. It's an impartiality interest, and I'll be staying in the chamber.
Thank you. Do we have any other disclosures of interest on tonight's agenda? Councillor Pemberton?
Yes, my workplace, Westcycle, received some vouchers from the Fremantle Markets as part of a community event we ran in Freo, and so it's an impartiality interest, but I will remain in the chamber as it won't impact my decision in any way.
Thank you very much. Any others? Nope. Responses to previous public questions taken on notice are printed in the agenda. We've got some questions submitted for public question time and some additional people listed here. I'm going to take the planning ones first and then go to the other ones. So the first planning one listed is, and apologies, the pen hadn't quite started working when you wrote this down, so I'm going to say it's Simon and Mike, but I might not be correct there on PC 23.1. If you were here early, you wrote your name down to talk about the Herbert Street item. Simon, Mike? Might be running late. Yeah, you might also be listed to speak. Is your name Mick Brankovic? Yes. Mick. Yes. No, that's okay. Oh, really? Oh, dear. Okay, maybe I move back. We have to balance online and real life. Okay, so speaking on that item, I don't know if you had an order in which you wanted to speak. Yep, great. So if you can just state your name to begin with, and you've got 3 minutes, and we'll give you a little buzzer.
Mick Banovich for the demolition of 21 Herbert Street. Look, we've
just want to stand with him, if that's okay, because this is the home for me and my kids.
We've on the last meeting we've established that the owner wants to rebuild that house, demolish the current one, which is I'd like to remind you at the moment is full of asbestos and it's now becoming friable, so it's becoming airborne, and we'd like to get rid of it and rebuild a dwelling that's more in line with the streetscape that's currently in Herbert Street, unlike the couple of 3-story buildings that are on the corner of Fay and Herbert. So we're just in support of that and hoping that all of you will vote accordingly to allow the demolition order to come through. That's it.
Thank you. And then on the same item, I've got Christina Milania to speak. Yep.
So just excuse me if I don't make sense, because I had a stroke a year ago and I'm going through really bad separation in court. So this process has been very hard for me because I can't deal with, we've been here 3 times for a house that is, whoever saw it or who read the report states that the house is unfit. For me, my kids had to evacuate this house. My mum bought this house for me and my kids, so we are not on the street, because I was put on the street and I've moved 5 times in 2 years. So the problem for us is we want this house to have a happy memory time, and it's already started horribly. And also for us to live in something that we will have to keep fixing is just going to be horrible and stressful for me to have to call someone and pay that extra because no one wants to fix something, an old pipe that's, covered to get there has got asbestos, so they don't want to get there to do it anyway. So I will have to try and go through more and more stretches, which I don't think I deserve anymore. So please understand. And it's not a heritage house, so I don't know why this process had to be like this. It's been a long process for me, which shouldn't have had to happen. I should have started, planning a beautiful home for me and my kids.
Uh, Final speaker on
Yeah,
this
it's
one?
Mike Simon. Thank you for this opportunity. The thing is with this house, everything needed from inside to be ripped off as engineering inspection and building inspection stated. Timbers is rotten. All the ceilings need to pull it down, and everything needs to be replaced. Electrical, timber frame, roof. You can't walk on it. It's in state really bad. Now, as I said in previous meeting, owner of this property is willing to put something simple what was before to keep the street nice, nothing like 3-4 story house or something like that, because she likes that street like that. And as I said, that should not be a big issue. So issue is for her two grandchildren to live there in the house who is hazardous. And I talk with the people in the street, they're hidden away, the house is in that bad stage, and it's a lot of risk for them in the street. So that's all what I have to say.
Thank you. And I think that's everyone on the Herbert Street item. Is that correct? Okay. So we will bring that item forward in the agenda so that you guys can get a decision and early in the night tonight, because you can see we're probably going to have a reasonably long meeting, but we do need to do the rest of public question time first. So I will go to that. So Ian Kerr, you submitted your question, I think, first.
Thank you, Mayor. At the previous council meeting, you may remember, I noted that 40% of the increase in rates in the 2023-24 budget was for the new toilets and change rooms at South Beach. And I asked why council was loading the whole cost of the South Beach facilities onto the ratepayers of 23-24 when the benefits would accrue over decades to come. Indeed, the ratepayers of 23-24 are already getting negative benefits as part of the South Beach Reserve is a building site, and toilet and shower facilities are even more inadequate than they have been for the past year or so. And even these were out of use for part of last weekend and today. In particular, there are no accessible toilets, and this is somewhat unfortunate given that part of the funding for the overall project comes from changing places. And this is despite the city's statement on the 8th of August that, quote, new temporary toilets, including those for disabled access, have been installed. I'm not sure that we should expect much more from yesterday's statement that, quote again, new temporary toilets have been installed with more on their way, including accessible toilets. There's no sign of any preparatory works for those yet. So I ask, how long must we put up with this state of affairs? Are there even firm project timelines for construction of the new toilets and change rooms? And have tenders even been called for the project? But of most concern to me is the fact that the answer given to my question didn't even address the issue of why, but instead gave a very brief outline of how. And the distinction between why and how is not purely semantic and goes to the root of decision making and it makes me wonder what is going on here. Perhaps it would have been more appropriate to address the question to elected members rather than the administration, since it was always open to councillors to seek to reduce the impact on 23-24 rates by having the $2+ million treated as capital rather than current expenditure. In my more cynical moments, somehow I think the more pertinent question might have been whether elected members were even aware of what was in this part of the budget, and I apologise if that's a slur, it was unintended, it's my cynical mind. And if they were, why they thought it appropriate to slug current ratepayers in this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Clearly a number of things there, but one that I think we probably can get a quick update on is the accessible toilets, temporary.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So there are two phases to this project. The first phase being the demolition of the existing facilities. At the time that we do that, we will be changing the current temporary toilet facilities. They're being moved elsewhere. And the new temporary facilities that come in will include disabled facilities as well, but they are temporary until we start the construction of the new facility. That's not yet been tendered. It's about to go out to tender. And the anticipated start for the works for the construction of the new facilities is thought currently to be around late November.
Thank you. Next person is Margaret Kerr.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting tonight. I've got the microphone wrong. I want to speak about the Fremantle Markets item. I attended the FPOL meeting on the 9th of August, and on exiting the chamber was approached by the CEO of Fremantle Markets, who asked why I was at the meeting. Was I perhaps a journalist? I said no, that I was just there as a ratepayer. And it's primarily as a ratepayer that I'm here tonight, though I do also have a professional background in heritage conservation. I'm here as a ratepayer because I'm very concerned about the assumption that there is genuine community support for the business plan. I have read all 387 public submissions, as I'm sure all of you have, and I note the strong similarity between many of them. Many of us have participated in and even coordinated similar exercises. That's perfectly legitimate. The show of support from stallholders for the current operators of Fremantle Markets is impressive, but it would be worrying if this was absent. But what really baffles me is that almost every submission supporting the current operators mentions the need for urgent repairs as a primary reason to accept the business plan. Surely the need for urgent repairs should be a reason not to support the business plan, especially when it is linked to years of neglect. The building is demonstrably in very poor condition. There my professional background is perhaps speaking. For whatever reason, the current operators have not been able or willing to carry out essential maintenance and repairs. The work involved is certainly very expensive, but the longer conservation work is postponed, the more onerous it becomes. Neglect of tuck pointing, for example, is a hugely expensive problem to remedy. The same can be said of shoddy repainting without adequate preparation. We appear to have seen some of that recently. As ratepayers, we need operators for Fremantle Markets that can be relied upon to identify and carry out essential maintenance before it becomes urgent and before the damage becomes impossible to reverse. I urge you to reject the business plan and to call for tenders. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person I've got is on actually the FPOL item, the non by Councillor Pemberton about prohibiting smoking, and it's Melissa Ledger.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Melissa from Cancer Council WA. I'm the Director of Cancer Prevention and Research at Cancer Council, which is Western Australia's largest not-for-profit or non-government charity to address all types of cancers. So I'd like to show our support and encourage the City of Fremantle today to make the decision around supporting and prohibiting smoking in Walialup Court and High Street. I wish to discuss a little bit around tobacco and then some community attitudes towards smoke-free areas. So I'm sure you are aware the use of tobacco products such as tobacco cigarettes are universally known to cause and contribute to significant risks, including cancer and as well as other diseases. The risks are magnified when tobacco is smoked socially because tobacco smoke is also carcinogenic or cancer-causing when it's inhaled in a second-hand manner, so people nearby smokers. Tobacco use is also the leading cause of preventable death and disease in Australia. In 2018, nearly 20,000 deaths, that's 13% of all deaths in Australia, were attributed to tobacco use. The other issue that we're seeing a rise of is use of e-cigarettes or vaping, especially amongst young people. And extending smoke-free areas has the opportunity to reduce and protect other people from those aerosols that are given off by e-cigarette use. E-cigarettes themselves are harmful. We know that there's very strong evidence that non-smokers who use e-cigarettes are 3 times more likely to take up tobacco smoking than those who do not use e-cigarettes. They are very much a gateway to tobacco use. E-cigarettes also do have the potential to produce environmental pollutants in quantities sufficient to harm. There's a real importance for smoke-free environments. We know that there are many benefits in protecting non-smokers. They support people who do smoke and are seeking to quit by reducing relapse, and also supports the denormalisation of smoking and also reduces the uptake of smoking with young people. Other local councils, I'm sure you're aware, are extending their smoke-free areas to reduce community exposure to environmental tobacco smoke and create healthy environments for their communities, and also as part of their public health planning objectives. Just a little bit on community support. We know that 8 out of 10 WA adults support creating more smoke-free places in WA, and that vaping should be considered the same as smoking and not allowed in the same areas where smoking is not allowed. So that's 8 out of 10 WA adults when we do our surveys. So there's strong community support for the proposal that's forward today. There's a real opportunity here for the City of Fremantle to show real leadership in extending smoke-free areas and to support the health and wellbeing of your community. In conclusion, we support the development of smoke and vape-free environments within the City of Fremantle, and we'd be pleased to contribute to feedback and to support the City in their endeavours to be more smoke-free.
Thank you, Melissa, and right on 3 minutes. And we're going back to the markets item with Philip Dawson.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak, Ms. Mayor, councillors. There's a saying, time nor tide waits for no man or woman. And to understand the markets, sometimes we have to go back in time. Let's go back in time to 2008. Back then, the city, the council, and the markets were deeply divided over the Fremantle Markets lease. Inside the markets, the internal divisions were the worst in the entire history of the markets. After the lease with FMPL was approved, the council and the city moved on to other issues, naturally. But for the stallholders and FMPL, the markets were damaged by the bitter and very negative public debate. In the eyes of the public, the markets were a terrible place. For 4 to 5 years, the market struggled. We were in a ditch and struggling to get out. The retail world was changing dramatically, and the markets were at a crossroads. Then, Natasha Atkinson arrived. I wondered when I first saw her and met her if she would survive the markets. Well, she did more than survive. She excelled by guiding the Fremantle markets and stallholders out of the deep ditch. And now the markets are better than ever with great work from the stallholders and the management. However, still today, negativity persists. But I can assure you, the Fremantle markets are bigger and better than the negative attacks. It's a great positive story. The markets and majority of stallholders have positively moved on from those dark days. And most fair-minded people in the city of Fremantle and visitors understand this. For me personally, it's a great feeling to be part of the Fremantle markets. Having a small business for nearly 40 years, to be part of the Fremantle community and through my rental payments, contribute a little to the city. Let it be known, though, I will also defend the Fremantle markets robustly and relentlessly, as it has been a defining and happy part of my life. I strongly advise members to vote to proceed to enter a lease agreement with FMPL. It's a choice built upon positivity and great results for the market, city, and the ratepayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next person I have is El Metzax on the same item. El Metzax. Yep. Okay, great. And I have Natasha Atkinson on the same item.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Passion is the driving force behind every great endeavour, and I believe that the majority of councillors are well aware of our passion. The traders, FMP, and myself personally have for Fremantle markets and the approval of the business plan. Our shared commitment is not just about business; it's about preserving a piece of the city's soul. It is. As someone deeply involved in this endeavour, I can confirm that nobody holds the affection for Fremantle markets that we do. The history, the memories, and the promise of its future. Our intent is to not only renew the lease, but to usher in an era of transformation and rejuvenation. As no councillors have approached me with additional questions or concerns, please allow me to share a voice of the community, Eddie Watling, on behalf of the fishing boat traders, whose submission echoes our sentiment. I'm writing to express the support of the Fishing Boat Traders Group Incorporated for the City of Fremantle's proposal to grant Fremantle Markets Proprietary Limited a new 20-year lease over the historic market site, as presented in the business plan. As the coordinator of Fishing Boat Harbour Trader Group Incorporated, I have firsthand seen the positive effects that Fremantle Markets has on the local community, the significant value it brings to the Fremantle Fishing Boat Harbour and the Fremantle retail sector in general. Fremantle Markets is not only a cultural icon, but also a vital economic driver for local businesses. The markets attract a substantial number of visitors, both local and tourists, who in turn patronise the diverse range of businesses in Fremantle, including Fishing Boat Harbour. Granting Fremantle Markets Proprietary Limited a new lease will ensure the continued success of this iconic institution, maintaining the positive ripple effect that benefits all the traders within the Fishing Boat Harbour. Furthermore, FMPL consistently demonstrates its commitment to maintaining the market's vibrancy and improving its offerings. The expertise of FMPL in managing and operating a successful market is evident in the engaging and dynamic experience that has always been provided to visitors. Granting a new 20-year-long lease will ensure that the momentum has been built up over many years can be maintained and continue to foster collaborative partnership that will lead further enhancements, events and initiatives that will attract both locals and tourists to Fremantle and the Fishing Boat Harbour precinct. The Fishing Boat Harbour Group firmly believes that granting Fremantle Markets Proprietary Limited a new lease is not only in the best interest of the market itself, but also the surrounding businesses and the broader Fremantle community. The stability and security that a long-term lease provides will encourage continued investment in the market, resulting in more vibrant and prosperous precinct that benefits all stakeholders involved. The Fremantle Markets Fishing Boat Harbour Traders Group strongly supports granting a new lease, 20-year lease to FMPL. Yours sincerely, Eddie Watling.
I'm going
Our love for the
13-second warning.
Oh, sorry. Our love for the historic site is unwavering. With your approval, we can open the doors to a future where Fremantle markets can thrive in a way that benefits us all. Thank you.
Well done, just in time. That brings us to the end of public question time as far as the listings that I have. So that takes us through to a few other things before we get to these items. I haven't been given notice of any petitions, deputations or special deputations, but we do have a presentation from Councillor Kamada.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Fitzharding. I'll be brief because I know we've got a lot to get through tonight. Recently, I was very fortunate to go on a family holiday with my wife, and in my travels, we visited Kapaldelunda, which is a sister city to Fremantle, and also the town from which my grandparents came to, on my dad's side, to Fremantle from many, many years ago. And I've got to thank Johnny Alberti. I mean, it was a private holiday, but it was still nice to represent Fremantle and meet with the councillors. And Johnny Alberti notified Mayor Franco Ingrilli and his wife Anita Paparoni of our visit, and Anita was waiting there on our arrival. And from the outset, it was clear that the people from Kapaldelunda have an unbelievable respect for the sister city relationship. Like other representatives from the city of Fremantle before us, we enjoyed hospitality that was second to none, and we were shown important sites around the town, many of which have direct links to Fremantle, such as the Sanctuary of Madonna. We also managed to score an article in the local newspaper which talked about the original statue, which was kept in the church up on top of the hill, the famous church up there, which many of us are familiar with now. And it was in 1925 that particular statue went missing, and there's been investigations ever since that have even come to Fremantle to try and find the locations of that particular statue. They probably thought maybe one of the local fishermen took it with them back over here or something, I don't know. But it's quite interesting, the article. We also visited the council building and discussed the positive impact that the descendants of Kapaldelunda have made to Fremantle and the strong connection that still exists today. And I believe it is one of the great strengths of Fremantle that we have benefited not only from Kapaldelunda, but the impact of various migrant groups over the generations that have all added their little unique bit to Fremantle and just makes Fremantle such a unique place. It was an honour to represent Fremantle. Mayor Ingrilli sent his regards to Mayor Fitzharding and the rest of the council, and he presented us with a small memento to pass on. And I've also added the newspaper article, and hopefully we will see representatives from Kapaldelunda join us for the 75th anniversary of the Madonna de Kapaldelunda. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kamada, and we'll make sure we take a photograph with the little flags from Kapaldelunda to send back to our friends over there. Okay. Any other presentations? Not that I'm aware of. Good. I'll move that we confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council 26th July, seconded by Councillor Lorver. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Is there any elected member communication? Right, I wanted to make a statement on the passing of former Councillor June Hutchison, OAM. So it's with great sadness that we acknowledge the passing of the much-loved community member and former councillor June Hutchison. June made an extraordinary contribution to community life as an active citizen, volunteer and campaigner. She was born in 1927, she's up on the screen there, in the small country town of Tambalup in the Great Southern region of WA. June's connection with Fremantle wasn't until 1983. She moved here in her mid-50s and immediately had an impact. From 1986 to 1991, June was the City of Fremantle Councillor and Chair of the Planning and Development Committee. Councillor Jenny Archibald recalls that it was during this time that Council voted to allow committee meetings to be open to the public, something of which June was greatly in favour. A teacher and librarian, June served as President of the School Library Association and as Chair of both the Fremantle Library Advisory Committee and Fremantle Arts Centre Press, as it was then. She was a strong advocate for local heritage and was a member of the Fremantle History Society for many years. She was passionate about social inclusion, social justice, and progressive change, co-founding the Fremantle Justice Group in 1993. Even in her 90s, June maintained a strong focus on issues like the treatment of refugees and asylum seekers. Councillor Thompson recalls joining council at a time when there was an abundance of strong and prominent female councillors, setting the benchmarks for female participation in local government. These included June Hutchison, June Boddy, Jean Hobson, Deirdre Sowden-Overmars, Ruth Belbin, and Shirley Mackay, to name a few. June never gave up on being independent, and Steve Grant captured her very well in this photograph. Most of our recent memories around this table of June were her walking the streets of Fremantle. Her services to the community were recognised in 1999 when she was named Fremantle Citizen of the Year, and in 2020 when she received a Medal of the Order of Australia in the Queen's Birthday Honours. In paying our respects, June will be remembered as a role model for many Fremantle citizens. She was a valued, passionate and proud member of our community. She gave so much of her time to so many groups and causes, and her opinions were greatly respected. She is remembered for being fair, usually quite firm in her view, and very determined. Councillor Archibald recalls that no matter what meeting June was in, she would always correct the grammar and spelling of the agendas. Ever the teacher and librarian, and someone after my own heart. So on behalf of the City of Fremantle, we extend our condolences to David, Jane, Mark and June's wider family and friends. Thank you for your service and rest in peace, June. All right, we're going to go through to our reports so we'll first go to Planning Committee for the Herbert Street item, and then we will jump to FPOL for the Markets item and then come back to Planning Committee. So Councillor Jones, as Chair of Planning Committee, did you want to introduce and move the item?
I'll move the committee recommendation, then when it's seconded, I would like to speak.
Yep, so we'll grab a seconder for that. Councillor Groom.
So I would just like to give a little bit of background on this. I think it is quite a difficult decision. The officer's recommendation to the committee was that demolition should be refused. The committee, I think every committee member said it was very much an on-balance decision, a line ball decision for them, but the decision of committee was a 4-1 vote to allow demolition, but without sufficient numbers to use delegation, so it comes to council. But I would just like to give a bit of background. Since that committee meeting, I've been contacted by 3 families in the street who are very concerned about the demolition, and going into the history of it, people probably are familiar with the 3-story house immediately adjacent to this one, replaced a single-story house. I believe it was single-story. I'm not sure of the heritage value of it. There was a very, very strong campaign in the street to prevent that house being built, and ultimately it was approved on appeal when Graham Kereth was Minister for Planning and had that absolute discretion to make decisions on appeal. And I think people in the street are concerned that if this demolition was allowed, we then create a vacant lot between a single-story house and an almost entirely single-story streetscape and a 3-story house on the corner. And I think that's really the crux of it. If we had the power, as we used to have, to say we only allow demolition if we are approving the replacement building at the same time, in this case, once we allow the demolition, we don't have very much control over what replaces it. And council policy does allow, or not policy, but council town planning scheme does say that if you have a single-story house, a vacant block, and a 3-story house, the person on the vacant block can claim these transitional clauses to put the height in between the buildings either side. So I accept in good faith that the applicants clearly don't want to do that, and they have shown indicative plans, but they haven't submitted them. But the real issue for me is that once the council allows the demolition and the demolition takes place, we then have very little ability to protect the streetscape in future. So I would be interested to hear what other elected members think about this. I think it is, I say, very much line ball. And I would say to the applicants that if the council decides to refuse demolition, it doesn't mean that you have to keep the whole house. We're not talking about a heritage house that has to be kept in its entirety and refurbished. it's not the house itself that's heritage. The heritage clause comes in because of its contribution to the streetscape. The house itself was built in about, I think, 1942, we think, around about 1940. It's not similar to the other houses in the street, which are more like 1900. But it does fit very clearly into the streetscape as a single-story house. And there are numerous examples like this in Hilton where the house demolition is not allowed, but the house effectively has to be deconstructed and reconstructed because of asbestos, because of rotten roof timbers, because of leaking roofs. So if councillors have a mind to refuse demolition, I would just say this to the applicants, it doesn't mean you have to go and repair and replace all the bathrooms in situ where they are. You don't have to replace all the ceilings where they are. You simply have to create a house where the front two rooms reflects what's there now, and behind that you can have a modern house with whatever. You need to talk to the planners about that. So I'm very much in two minds about this, and I really would like to hear what other councillors' opinion of it is. I very much sympathise with the applicant and their situation, and we have to balance that up against the council's ability to protect the streetscape of what is a very important heritage street. I mean, almost every house on that side of the street is about 1890 to 1910 timber or stone house. So very difficult decision, I think, and I'd be interested to hear what people say.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Groomer, seconder. Did you want to speak next, or shall I go to my list? Okay, Councillor Lorver.
Thank you. I'm of so much of two minds in this. I think I voted each way for and against this specific item at different times because it is a very, very difficult one. And Councillor Jones, and I appreciate all that additional context around it, because as more information gets to be known about what the situation is here, it kind of becomes clearer to me as to where I might be landing. You know, we do, I live in Hilton, so as Councillor Jones mentioned, we have no really individually listed heritage houses, but the whole suburb is heritage listed. And so oftentimes people will buy a house and strip it right back down to the studs, have to replace the roof. But in the end, it's a modern house, but it retains the characteristics of the neighborhood. So you're absolutely spot on, Councillor Jones, that there are things that you can do without demolishing the entire house. During planning committee, I supported the most recent planning committee. I supported demolition because I felt the precedent had already been set with the house on the corner, but and that then led me to, okay, well, this could provide a transition to the streetscape, but that precedent has not been set yet by this council or any local government in Fremantle that I'm aware of. It was a ministerial decision, so approving demolition will set that precedent. And so when we set that precedent, then what happens when the next neighbor wants to do something else? The next neighbor, then pretty soon the streetscape is not what we're trying to protect. It is, yeah, it's a challenging site, and purchasing a house in Fremantle does come with a lot of its own kind of challenges, because we are a historic city. We like to preserve our culture and our buildings and as such. So you know, I'm not really sure which way I'm going to go on this tonight. Like I said, I've voted for and against it in the past, but knowing that the precedent hasn't been set yet for this street, I'm leaning towards the officer's recommendation to not approve, and going that way. But I'm interested to hear what other members have to say.
Thanks. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Just some brief context. I know I'm the only person that voted against the item. I do struggle more and more, as I've been in planning for a number of years, to put the wrecking ball through any buildings that represent an era of Fremantle. So that's just some context as to why I maybe voted against this one. And hearing what our chair mentioned, Councillor Jones, I'm sure if there's a situation that could be found in the future where we could salvage part of the house and work with the applicant to find something that works to restore and enhance the heritage while also allowing a new build, I think that could be a good situation that I would most definitely support. But on the item itself, at this stage, I can't support demolition.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I was meant to be at the planning committee, but unfortunately I was sick as a dog with the flu in bed. But I can assure my colleagues that while this is an incredibly difficult decision, they always are because real people's lives are involved. I would have voted with Councillor Lang to not approve the demolition. We've over the years seen, I know I have, a huge number of very similar examples where the condition of the dwelling was terrible, where particularly timber frame ones, but where the streetscape was a very critical part of what the community were wanting us to maintain. So many people, so there's always the concern that that I won't say heartstrings. I mean, it's just genuine empathy with people in this situation that they feel caught up by a building like this. But our job on council is to the community, to the broad community, to the whole community. And so many people buy into Fremantle for the character, for the characteristics that are there. And I actually lived at the end of Herbert Street for a while, so I know quite a few of the residents, and I'm absolutely confident that people who have bought into that area bought into that character. And they certainly didn't buy into the notion of the three-storey building that Mark built on the corner there. And it still irks people, infuriates people that it's there. But I just want to emphasise that it is about the streetscape. That is the heritage of the area. There is, as others have said, so much that can be done, particularly with a timber-framed house. They're probably the easiest houses to renovate compared to the limestone houses that are perhaps considered more, I guess, traditionally more elegant, more heritage, if you like. But the timber houses actually, in many areas, actually outnumber the limestone houses. They are, in some ways, more Fremantle than their sort of more robust brother. So, at the end of the day, it's a difficult decision, but we have to protect the character of Fremantle. That is what I'm sure it will say in the strategic plan. I'm sure the community will reiterate that again, as they have done in my experience for the last 40 years. And so I'm apologise in some ways to the owner who will feel incredibly aggrieved, but I have to make this decision based on what the staff have presented, based on my own perception of the dwelling, based particularly on my understanding of the streetscape, and that's what we need to protect.
Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor. Look, I supported the demolition on the planning committee, and of course I've been thinking about this one for some time, and I'm still going to support the demolition, and it's for a number of reasons. I don't think you've got to put it in context of where this actual house is. It's next door to the three-storey house on the corner, which we all know about. It's in front of a three-storey at the back of it, which we all, hopefully most of us have been out on site because it's a very important demolition. And if you haven't been out on site, you shouldn't really be making a decision tonight, in my view. And it is totally overlooked. Now, then the site starts sloping down as you head south. You have the limestone house, and then it slopes down. And that's when you've got a few more of the similar houses to what we're discussing tonight, which are intact, which I think would be 1940s, 1950s perhaps. So the Herbert Street streetscape, in my view, is not going to be compromised by losing this house. And when I say losing this house is in some state of disrepair. Now, it's all very well for people to say, oh, it's stud framed and you can do this and you can do that. I don't think too many people would want to put money into do this and do that into this house if they had a good look at it. So my view is to still support the committee's recommendation. Councillor Jones and I had a good look at it when we were there in the pouring rain, mostly 2 months ago now. So nothing's, in my views, changed my perception of this. I know it's a hard one, it's a tricky one. There's other factors involved that we hear, but we've got to put them aside and just look at what we think's right for this area, and I don't think demolishing it is a bad thing.
Councillor Visick.
Look, I'm not going to add much more to the words of Councillor Graham. I think he's put a really good argument forward for an approval of the demolition. I think for me, the burden of setting a precedent to rest solely on this family in a building that Councillor Graham has described really well, it needs a lot of work. So I'm going to be supporting the demolition.
Councillors, any further discussion? I have a question for officers and then I might make some comment. If the demolition were to be refused tonight, i.e. if the committee recommendation were to be, I assume, voted down and then the original officer's recommendation to be supported, and so demolition was refused, if this same applicant came back with a proposed building on the site that envisaged substantial demolition of the existing building, I guess you can't give me a view on how that would be treated, but is that potentially a way forward for the applicant?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. Obviously it's a bit of a hypothetical. The department also empathises with the complexity of this particular one, and I think we're all after a good outcome. We want an outcome where there is some restoration of the streetscape, because it's more about the streetscape than the intrinsic nature of the heritage fabric of the building. So to work with the applicant on an outcome where some of that is retained, and certainly the streetscape, his contribution to the streetscape is continued, is certainly something we would be very happy to work with to get that outcome.
Right, thanks for that clarity. I mean, I'm not particularly worried about the precedent issue because we remain within the North Fremantle heritage area for the remainder of the streetscape, i.e. there won't be anything that can therefore slip through. Everything will come back to us for decision. So precedent doesn't particularly concern me. I agree with Councillor Jones's view that it is a crazy situation where we can agree to demolition without knowing what is going to be built in its place, and that there is concern about that 3-storey precedent so close by that contributes to streetscape. But I also want to take the applicant on face value, and if they are saying they're going to build a small cottage much like the rest of the street, I really want to believe that. So I'm very line ball. I'm probably leaning the way of supporting the committee recommendation for demolition. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Jones or Councillor Groom, did you want to? No? Yes? Thank you.
Yeah, so I've been line ball on this one all along. I think I was persuaded in our last decision by a report from my colleagues who'd been on site and kind of consideration of the engineering reports that we received. Particularly, I think for me was the condition of the roof timbers, so that it does require an entire rebuild of the roof. And then when I looked at the extent condition of the linings and so forth. It just got to the point that we were beyond the usual strip it back to a frame and rebuild to strip it back to not much and rebuild. And then the other consideration for me was actually the impact of the development that we wish wasn't there on that site. So that building is completely overshadowed and overdwarfed by the adjacent building, and a contemporary redesign might create an opportunity to deal with some of that. At the same time, an approach that would leave the first couple of rooms and essentially put a new building behind, has some merit. So I have really struggled, and I'm probably still a bit of a flip of a coin tonight, although I'll probably stand by my decision last time, having spent some time reaching that one.
Thanks, Councillor Groom. Councillor Jones, did you wish to close?
Yeah, just to say that I think the key issue is whether we feel we can control the development once the house is demolished. And in all good faith, these applicants could demolish the house and then find they can't find a builder, they can't afford to rebuild, they sell the block, and then, having allowed the demolition, we then the town planning scheme and the policies that would allow somebody to put in a very large two-storey house, and it would be very hard to refuse. So I very much line ball, but I think I'm not going to support demolition. But I would urge the applicant not to see that as the disaster they maybe think it is, because we're not talking about keeping the whole house. We're talking about keeping the front section, and I'm sure that our planning officers will work with you to show you the sorts of things that can be done. There are plenty of examples around the place. When I first looked at the house, I thought, well, you really would not want to try and keep all this. It's got very elaborate plaster ceilings, which are all broken and leaking. The bathrooms are pretty dreadful. The part of the house that is quite good is the front. The front balcony terrace is actually the best part of the house. And 2 doors down, there's a house which has been restored, almost identical. It's the mirror image of this house, which has been fully restored. And I think, in fairness to those people, if they've maintained their house and restored it, and this one's being neglected, it is a deceased estate. Then, in fairness to them, they're 2 doors down. They're trying to preserve some sort of semblance of similarity on this side is a fair thing for them. So very much on balance, but I, in the end, won't support demolition.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. So we'll put this to a vote. We're voting on the committee recommendation. So if you're voting in support of this, you'll be voting in support of demolition, just to be very clear. So all those in favour? 7. So that's 7 in favour, and all of those against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to back in my vote and support the committee recommendation with my casting vote. It's not a cast? 7-6. Did you count me? Oh, okay, good. Oh, don't like doing that. Okay, so we're going to committee, the officer's recommendation from committee, which is printed in the agenda. So for those of you in the gallery, it is now, because the approval of the demolition was lost, we're now looking at the refusal. Can we? So can I just check it again? Yeah. So those people who voted in favour of and can we just get the committee recommendation back on the screen? Sorry. Those who voted in favour of the committee recommendation. So Councillors Groom, Councillor Archibald, you voted in favour of the committee recommendations. Councillors Graham, Kamada, Fitzharding and Busick. So that's 6. And we can assume, yeah. Is that, Councillor Mofflin, your understanding? Yep, good. Okay. All right, so we are going to the refusal. I don't think we need to debate it, do we? Just need a mover and a seconder. So I'm going to, Councillor Pemberton's moving it. Councillor Lawver's seconding it. We can go straight to a vote, can we? I'm assuming we can go straight to a vote. Nobody wants to really speak. Councillor Pemberton, you want us? You're voting. All right. So all of those in favour of the refusal, and those against. So same but different. Yeah. All right. So I would encourage the applicants to engage with officers to talk about what you can do in terms of retaining part of that building. As the Director of Planning has said, there is an opportunity there. It may not be as bad as you think. All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item. I'm going to go to the markets item now, and I would then like to move to the notice of motion by Councillor Pemberton on smoking, because I know we've still got people in the gallery for that. But there are a lot of you here for the markets item, so we'll jump to that one next. I'll move the officer's recommendation for that item. Get a second of that, Councillor Moughlin, and anyone who wishes to speak on the item. Councillor Vusic.
I just want to flag that I'd like to put a deferral motion before council.
So you want to move a procedural motion to defer?
To defer, yeah.
Yep, okay. So you can speak for 5 minutes on that if you get a seconder. Do we have a seconder for a deferral procedural motion? Okay, so Councillor Kamada, you want to second that? So Councillor Vusic, you can speak for 5 minutes. Councillor Kamada, you'll speak for 3 minutes.
Look, I just want to put it on record. This has been a very difficult item, and this is not Councillor Vusic who dislikes FMLP and the Fremantle markets and the stallholders. This is just that I am doing my job as a councillor, and I've unpacked the reported information to make a decision. At the FPOL meeting of the 9th of August, I spoke on 4 key issues, and I'm not going to go through that. It basically is looking at challenging the 88% approval for the business plan. And the 4 items that I touched on was the location of the 387 respondents. It was not presented, the evidence of ChatGPT and AI responses, conflict of interest of FMPL and market stallholders, and the sample size. I want to move on to have a look at the additional information that was provided for the OCM, and that was a pie chart that had a look at the location of the respondents. If we have a look at the Fremantle stallholders, they represent 28%. In my view, we should not count them as 108. Perhaps we should count them as 1 because they're all pretty much the same. We also need to consider their conflict of interest because it is the stallholders and FMPL who will benefit from this item, from this 20-year lease. The locality not disclosed, 11%, shouldn't be included. It just doesn't meet the threshold of reliability and validity when it comes to surveying. The respondents that came outside of Fremantle, 27%, nice to know, but we don't know how many times they come to the Fremantle markets, the nature of their business, etc. The one item that is significant, and that is the City of Fremantle. They're 34%, and they have a strong case to be counted because they are the ratepayers and residents of Fremantle. If you have a look at the 34%, when you have compared that to the 88%, you get a different flavour of the responses. I want to go to the next item, and that's address GTL Enterprises. I'm on record. I don't know these people. I don't have any conflict of interest with these people. I am judging this information and data that's before me to make a decision.
Councillor Vusic, I'm just going to remind you that you're speaking on the deferral, so we need
I'm
to
on the
come
deferral.
to the
I want to do
reasons
the
for deferral.
All right. Let me go to table 1. When you, my reasons for the deferral is this. I put together two tables which looks at the finances. The first table is the rent we can expect as a city in comparison over a 20-year lease. We look at FMPL over a 20-year lifespan of the lease, we're going to get 16 million. If you have a look at GTL Enterprises rate over a 20-year period, we're going to have 18 million. 18 is greater than 16. By ignoring the GTL Enterprise submission, we are committing the ratepayers and residents of Fremantle to a loss of revenue of 2 million. If this was a personal decision of each elected member, would we accept a $2 million loss on a financial transaction? I know I wouldn't. Table 2, on the left-hand side, $2 million, we would be better off with GTL or losing with FMPL. But when you have a look at the capital works invested over 20 years, we have a look at FMPL, 3 million maybe over 20 years. If you have a look at GTL Enterprises, the first 3 years, there's a commitment for 4 million. In the next, over the 10-year period, there's another 2.5 million, which gives you 6.5 million. The city, the ratepayers, would be better off with 6.5 million invested over 10 years compared to up to and proposed 3 million by FMPL over 20 years.
You've got 1 minute left to get to the deferral.
Okay. You know, it's really interesting, Mayor. You give other people a lot more time to
It's a procedural motion. It's written in our
Okay.
standing orders.
Okay, cool. The two things that are really important coming to the conclusion is in year 1, we will get another $200,000 from GTL. Also, where there's an establishment of an advisory board to include all storeholders, community members, and councillors. The reason why I want to defer it is in the best interest of the ratepayers of Fremantle. We have invited GTL Enterprises to make a submission, and they have done so. We have already invited them to the table. Their numbers are much better.
That's time. Can you confirm that the words up on the screen are your reasons for
Yes, I said the item is to be deferred.
So what's on the screen is correct?
To defer the decision to the next appropriate council meeting, to the next OCM due to the identified issues with reliability and validity of the data relating to the submission responses and the considerable financial variance between the two proposals, FMPL and GTL Enterprises.
So I think the officers have tried to sort of word that into a procedural motion for you that's printed on the screen. Yeah. So that's the motion, and then you'd have reasons written underneath it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just to confirm that, Councillor Kamada, you've now got 3 minutes to speak.
Thanks again, Mayor Fitzhugh. Look, yeah, it's, I was supporting this, obviously, to firstly hear what Councillor Vucic had to say on this very important matter. And I've got a few words that, and hear me out, because it does lead to why I've supported this and where my stance has been all along. And again, it's, as Councillor Vucic said, it's nothing personal against anyone that is involved in all the stakeholders and so forth. At the May 10 FPOL meeting, I supported a deferral on the decision to advertise a business plan until the full council meeting of that month. I felt that if there was a will to test the market in order to return the best possible outcome for all stakeholders, that we needed to keep that door open, and that's why I made that decision at the time. And as I've stated from the outset, for me it's about the process. This process started really in 2020, way before I came onto council. Council voted to go down the path of advertising a business plan that would see the lease renewed with the current leaseholders, so I respect that process and that fact. Regardless of what is decided tonight, it's imperative that urgent building upgrades that are used as an argument for renewing a lease are well defined, and there is a clear understanding between the tenant and council as to how this will be achieved with a timeline attached. In conclusion, I think there's been a lot of question marks around this particular renewal since 2008, when, and as I think Philip Dawson spoke about, that was not a great time, and I appreciate your comments. And that, you know, we all want to see the very best for the markets. But for me, I still believe the only way to transparently test the market would have been to go through the public tender process, and hence, for where I sit, my support for a deferral on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamada. Because this is a procedural motion, there'll be no further debate, and we'll put it to a vote. So all those in favour of deferral? Councillors Kamada and Vusic and Lorber? Yep, and all those against? Yep. So that's lost. So we'll go back to the item as moved and seconded. Do we have speakers on the item as moved and seconded? Councillor Kamada, your light's still on there. Councillor Vusic?
Well, I guess I can finish now, can't I? Where was I? It was really important that we had a look at the numbers. And the numbers are 2 million up with GTL Enterprises. Then I said what I didn't get an opportunity to express, and I had to really tighten it, is the fact of 6.5 million over a 10-year period, which is much greater than 3 million, with a maybe attached to it. The thing that really also was impressive was in the first year, in the transition of a lease, would be another $200,000 to ease the transition. And the one that I really was impressed with was the establishment of an advisory board to include stallholders, community members and councillors. And I think we've had enough information from both sides of the fence, and I think that would be a really good positive step forward. Now, here's a really important point. FMPL's current lease expires in 2026. The city intends to revoke the current lease 3 years early. And this is something that's not included in the figures. The current lease base rent is 748 plus the turnover of 250, roughly $1 million. Our new lease is a base rate of 550 plus 250. It's 800,000. So we are going to lose, by revoking it 3 years, the difference is about $600,000. That's a very low estimate. This is our cat bus. This is a down payment on our South Beach toilets we're just giving away. The Fremantle business, I want to say in summary, the Fremantle Markets business plan analysis does not support the process that links 88% approval for the plan, because the data is not reliable and it is not valid. They are the two thresholds that surveys and submissions are measured against. And it may well be that we just didn't set the process right. The strength of the data points to 34% of ratepayers and residents who live in Fremantle due to the payment of rates years in and year out. It is the rates that account for more than 50% of the city's revenue. To mark them down to the status of visitors, friends and conflicted stallholders would not meet the pub test, nor a commercial interest in an asset at law. To allow and receive a submission from GTL Enterprises which addresses the financials and key terms of a lease is to invite another party to the table. The city, having accepted the submission and reported the financial contents, by virtue of its actions, have opened that door. The best interests of the ratepayers of Fremantle, who are the stakeholders of the Fremantle markets, is served by the GTL Enterprise, because they are offering, and there's a beauty in numbers, 2 million more over 20 years, 6.5 million investment in capital over 10 years, 4 million to be spent in the first 3 years, and another 2.5 million by the end of the 10th year. Compare that to up to and proposed, and I'm only quoting this from the information provided, 3 million by FMPL over 20 years at best. GTL are offering a one-off in the first 12 months tradition of $200,000 and I've already spoken about the advisory board. The last point to be addressed is the lease. And that lease is, we're going to lose another minimum $600,000. In conclusion, the agenda item before us that authorises the CEO to finalise and enter into a lease with FMPL for the property of 74 South Terrace, Fremantle, is flawed. I've demonstrated that at the FPOL committee, the data is flawed, and the financial terms do not provide the best deal for the ratepayers and residents, as shown by the GTL comparison. And you know what? I was even thinking if we got two players in there now, would be better to flesh that out, and I'd be prepared to put the tender aside. At least we have got some comparison and some competition, because what this process has demonstrated is there are interested people. There has been a person came through with goodwill, good numbers, and I cannot for the life of me understand why we would accept less. Thank you.
Probably got a question first following that. Just if the Director of City Business could respond to some of those comments on the potential rent loss.
Through the Mayor. So, yes, just responding to some of those statements about the rent. So, the current lease, the base rent did commence at $550, as is the current proposal. That actually increased over the term of the current lease in line with CPI increases. As part of the requirements of the Local Government Act and the process we're undergoing at the moment, we're required to undertake a rental valuation. That rental valuation came back, and the $550 that is currently proposed is proportionate with the rental valuation.
Back to you, Councillor Groom.
Yeah, so heard interesting discussion from Councillor Vusic, but we're not actually being asked to consider whether, to consider two bids. The decision in front of Council tonight is whether to accept the business case, which proposes that we proceed with negotiating with the current occupant, or to proceed to tender, which opens up the whole process, and presumably that's not something we would commence immediately, but we would need to time with the end of a lease. So that, just to be really clear for everyone in the room, that is the decision in front of Council. We're not choosing between two bids, because that's not the process as it's set out in the Local Government Act. So the information in front of us tonight is whether or not we accept the officer's recommendation, and I've been really, really clear on this all the way through. We have a really good business that has invested over a long time in the city, and there's plenty of people who have made commentary in the press in recent weeks suggesting it's not. But I wonder if they've been into the markets recently, because every stall space is full. It's heaving. You have to kind of push to get through the crowds, especially around the food area, and the market has clear evidence of continuing to adapt, to change the offering, to keep bringing people in. And that is the sign of a successful and dynamic operator. There's commentary about spend on the market, and it's certainly disappointing, the deterioration in the heritage fabric, but the city has to shoulder some of that as the building owner. And looking around, you can see the spend that the current proponents are doing to keep that thing limping along, and also to adapt it so that it can provide the new and contemporary products on offer. Looking at all of this, I thought about recent processes we've been through in the time I've been on council to put things out to tender, and one of the submitters drew our attention to this. Every one of those has failed. The business has failed. So the cafe at the Arts Centre, the snack bar at the pool, and the markets at South Fremantle. We went through a competitive process, and the uncertainty of that, the kind of the mismatch of our expectations with real market conditions brought those things undone. I'm not prepared to risk the markets. I know that a proponent has been able to make all sorts of offers because it's completely free of a tender process. They're not bound, there is no commitment, they've not looked at all the expectations, they've just been able to throw numbers around that look really sexy and enticing. But we have to throw our money where the businesses are that have a proven track record and keep this product going. And the reason we need to keep this business going is that it brings people into Fremantle that then eat at our restaurants, that shop in other shops, that have a great time, and they come back another time to do something different, to use our business offerings. They are the linchpin of Fremantle. People come here just for the markets the first time they come, and then they keep coming back. So I am fully supportive of the officer's recommendation and very clear about the decision that I'm being asked to make.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, I just thought maybe I should just move the amendment that I put forward, so that way when debate is on the item, if this passes, we're actually debating the item as potentially amended. If you're fine with that now, I'm happy to wait if you want to wait, but or I'm happy to move it.
I'll just check in with Councillor Jones because he did turn his mic off before to enable someone else to answer a question. Are you happy to speak after the amendments, or would you prefer to speak before the amendments?
I prefer to speak now. I may wish to speak on the amendment as well.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Councillor Lorber? So I'll come to you next.
Yeah, it's just like I say, it's the third time I've sat in the room while this process has been explained to elected members, and Councillor Vucic keeps coming back and proposing a process which is completely impossible. And it's the third time we've been through this. The decision before council is to negotiate with the current tenant or go out to tender. If we go out to tender, it'll be a closed process. Elected members will not be involved at all until the officers come back with a recommendation. We won't know who's put in a bid. We won't know what they've offered until the officers analyse those bids and come back with a recommendation. So some suggestion that the council's invited this other company to put in a bid, and now they should compare the bids and the officers should make recommendations, is completely and utterly untrue. It's completely wrong. It's completely outside of the process that's allowed to us. So if I went into More and More for a coffee and then wasn't very impressed with the coffee, so I go and see the CEO the next day and say, look, show me their business plan, I'll do better, kick them out, give it to me. That's about the status of this. The fact that somebody can look at the business plan of an organisation and then change a few numbers here and there, to look better, obviously you can do that. Anybody can do that. We are not in a position to consider that bid. And any suggestion that we should be is completely and utterly wrong. And I would also like to say, what would be the people's reaction if 108 stallholders had put in a letter saying they thought it should go to tender? Would that have been dismissed because they had a vested interest, or would it have been welcomed with open arms by the opponents and say, obviously the stallholders aren't happy? It's very common in any consultation process to have form letters. I mean, people do it all the time. And it happens on every major planning application. You get 200 comments and 98 of them are the same because somebody takes the trouble to write a statement and gives it to people to say, do you agree with this, sign it. To dismiss that is completely to change our consultation process. To say you have to live in Fremantle before you can have an opinion about Fremantle. You have to be a ratepayer before you can comment on a council item. You can't comment on the markets if you're a stallholder because you've got a vested interest. I can't imagine anybody whose comments will be more valid and more valuable. And then to suggest it's been generated by artificial intelligence, I think, in some kind of fairyland. So I hope we don't hear about this alternative proposal again because it doesn't exist and councillors should not refer to it. And the decision before us is accept the business plan or go out to tender. It's very simple. That's a yes or no.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Lorver, did we want to go to your amendments now?
I would love to move my proposed amendment.
And you've got them in the additional documents. Do we have a seconder for those? Councillor Lang? Back to you, Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, if we could pull it up on screen, I just want to make sure because this evening I've had a few conversations with Councillor Archibald about basically clarifying the intent of Part C. And yeah, I don't know if we need to amend the amendment, but basically, and I appreciate the markets had sent around an email and about this very thing. That the idea is to transition away from fossil fuels, but it's toward net zero, and there's a lot of ways to do that. So it's about if we could pull up the city, and the words there are, and in line with the City of Fremantle policies relating to transitioning towards net zero emissions, right after it's city.
So perhaps if you want to keep speaking to the intention,
Okay.
and we can get it up on the
Yeah.
screen.
So the intent is still the same, is to basically, this is a city-owned asset, and any improvements that we do to a city-owned asset probably should be in line with our overall goal towards transitioning away from fossil fuels and towards net zero. The first bits on here, because this is such a long lease, I basically am just trying to just set the standard at CPI versus CPI or the lesser of a number. So that way, over this 20 years, the ratepayers are not potentially, on the hook if things go as they have for the past couple of years. Everyone moves forward at the same pace, and that seems to be pretty neutral. And then, like I was saying, Part C is just to ensure that the funds, because it was a bit unclear about the funds for capital works, making sure that it's at least an amount versus this ambiguous kind of up to, which could be any amount, and then that any improvements are done in a time frame is agreed by the city. So these initial works will be done initially, and then also in line with our policies about relating towards transitioning towards net zero emissions. So hopefully this isn't very controversial. I mean, we declared a climate emergency. This council did anyways in 2019. We adopted a position in 2021. Both of those were before my time on council. But hopefully this gives ratepayers a little more certainty as to what they can expect out of the deal. And because I know every single one of us here, regardless of how we're coming at this, we all want the best outcome for the ratepayers, the best outcome for our city. And that's, I think, what everyone here has in common. And for me, if we approve what's on the screen, it gets us a little bit closer to delivering a better outcome for the people that we are elected to serve. So I'll open it up for debate, I guess.
Thanks, Councillor Lorver. Councillor Lang as seconder, you could speak now, or I can go to Councillor Mofflin. Okay, Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, I just have a question in regards to the implications of this amendment and the business plan. So the business plan talks to, or the essential terms, and I suppose this makes a change as I read it to the essential terms. Does that have an impact on the business plan as such, and would it then require a re-advertising of that plan?
Through the Mayor, I did seek some legal advice on Councillor Lorver's amendment, and it doesn't constitute a major change. So we wouldn't need to re-advertise the business plan based on these new terms.
Anything further, Councillor Mofflin?
I may do, but that was a question, and I'll come back
Fair
to
enough.
it. Thank you.
While the director does have the microphone, I guess, is there any officer comment on these amendments or concerns that you would see?
Through the Mayor, they're fairly minor changes. We have looked at CPI historically and what that does look like. Doesn't have any major impact on the costs, and the $3 million contribution was always the intention anyway. So yeah, there's no major concerns.
Thank you. Right, on the amendment, do we have any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, and I thank Councillor Lorver for bringing this forward. And I, I had to think about it in a little bit of depth, particularly in relation to changing things from percentage and CPI and the like. And then, of course, I realised that, as was being commented on by the officers in response to a previous question, the reality of leases in local government these days is the market valuing reset happens very regularly, and it doesn't really matter that much whether we put in place, CPI or 5%, or which is the greater or which is the lesser, because effectively it gets reset by market value every second period, which can be maybe 4 years. In this case, is 3 years. So obviously that's capped at 6% up or 6% down, which does potentially have an impact if we have a massive boom in rental values, or we have a massive crash in rental values. But the reality is it's a fair process that is put in place. So I support that. I thought it was worth explaining that for others who might not have picked that up immediately. And the commitment of the $3 million, there hasn't been a conversation where elected members were of any other view than there is this large sum of money that needs to be spent on this building, and it's in the order of $3 million as demonstrated by a body of work, and FMPL have given a commitment to be able to bring that forward. And so those wording changes to me all make perfect sense, because that's been the conversation. It just clarifies slightly better the conversation that we've been having.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Looks like we're probably ready to go to a vote on the amendment. So this is on Councillor Lorver's amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? And those against the amendment? So Councillor Vusic against, and that's carried. So we're back to the item as amended. Did anyone else wish to speak on the item as amended? Councillor Moughlin?
Thank you. Other councillors have made some very good points as to why I also support the officer's recommendation to proceed with this business plan. So I'm not going to rehash that, but I will pick up on a point that Councillor Jones and Councillor Groom was making, that the decision tonight in front of us is to accept the business plan or go out to tender. It actually isn't. We're either accepting the business plan or we're continuing along with this lease for a period of time. And till then, we need to make another decision about either a business plan or going out to tender. So we would be actually, if we don't accept this business plan, we're going to have a business that is sitting there for the rest of that lease period with a level of uncertainty which we've been told from stallholders creates concern, creates a desire for them to start to find a new home, and may then ultimately create a situation where the markets do become or do tend to wither on the vine, if you like, and visitors stop coming to Fremantle to visit the markets. And we heard the CEO of the markets talk to the interrelationship between the Fremantle markets and other parts of Fremantle. So the representative from the Fishing Boat Harbour Group spoke about the importance of the markets to the traders in Fishing Boat Harbour, and equally, I'm sure from the market's perspective, those traders in Fishing Boat Harbour are equally as important. So for me, I want to get on board, make sure we support the markets. If this was a purely commercial decision, you're not going to kick out a tenant who has been performing, who has been returning for the city, and who has been contributing to the cultural essence of Fremantle, and And absolutely, it's the bird in the hand that has been working for us, and I will support this recommendation this evening.
Thank you. I'll just remind the gallery that you're not to take photos in the chamber. Councillor Lorver. Oh, sorry, Councillor Archibald. How rude.
Thank you. Look, I concur with many of the comments my colleagues have already said. I just wanted to make one small comment though. The 157 businesses that work in the market, some 400 people who work there and earn a living, they pay rates to this city. They are ratepayers. They should have a say about what goes on there. I think we are a city that is driven by its ratepayers and its residents, and so I think the outcome of the public consultation phase was it was very appropriate for these people to have a say in the putting together of the business plan. So I just wanted to say that I think that 400 people who work down there do an enormous job for this city. So I obviously do support what's before us tonight, and I think that as Councillor Mofflin and Councillor Groom have said, this market has done an absolutely outstanding job in promoting Fremantle. It has gone absolutely gangbusters over all those years. I don't believe there's any other business in this city that puts $370,000 per year into advertising. This city, we put money in, but there is no other individual business collective that pumps $370,000 per year into this city. If there was to be any change at all to that market, there is no saying that what is happening there today would continue. And I think that is a real risk, and it's not a risk I'm prepared to take. So I fully support what's going on here. I just wanted to make one more comment too, that Councillor Lorver was very gracious in liaising with me over his amendment. And the part of the amendment that was put in originally did raise a bit of concern about gas. And we acknowledge that there are some 40 businesses down there who need gas. They can't have grilled chops or grilled chicken or whatever they grill down there without gas. So the phrase in there is really to say, well, as we go through this process of rebuilding the markets, wherever we can that it's practical and possible, we should look to bringing on board some of those ways in which we hope to be able to move toward net zero, which is something that this council has been talking about, and it's a journey we are now committed to going on. So that's where this particular comment comes from, and there are many ways of reducing emissions besides turning off the gas. So when they get really clever at doing electric barbecues, that might be the point where we can start looking at a transition. So I fully support this item that's before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, thank you. Just to start with, I don't know if we need to amend point 2 to strike the words without amendment, because we did amend it, but just procedurally, I'll leave that up to staff if that needs to happen. I love the markets, and I want to thank Natasha for providing that feedback about the initial amendment, because the intention was always to get us to net zero emissions, and there are a lot of ways to do that, and I understand not all of them are commercially available right this minute, but I really appreciate the commitment for not just the market as an organization, but all the stallholders to go in that direction with the city. I also just want to also say it's a great icon in our town. I think we all know that. But spending $370,000 to get 2.5 million visitors through there—that's amazing. And maybe we can steal your marketing person. Because we have a marketing budget, and we don't quite get to that level yet. But I would, it'd be great if we could, as a city, see that number be 5 million if we were doing it all jointly. But anyways, no, I do support this as amended. I appreciate folks voting in favor to make it a little bit more clear for our ratepayers and everyone paying attention. And I will be voting in favor.
All right, just making that change to that first clause that says without amendment to say with the following minor amendments. So if the mover and seconder, you as the mover and Councillor Lang as the seconder are comfortable with that, we can incorporate that. Oh, okay. Councillor Mofflin and I are happy with it. We're all happy, I think. Yep. Good. Okay. Councillor Pemberton, over to you.
Thank you. I am not going to duplicate some of the things that have been said by colleagues that I wholeheartedly agree with already, but I did want to point out one other aspect, and that's why now? Why this process now? And it is quite unusual to be discussing a lease 3 years before it's over. And that's because 3 years ago, the Fremantle Markets came to us and said, we need some major works done. There are urgent repairs needed. There are compliance issues that need to be dealt with. We need a new roof on the yard. We need to bring things up to code. Can you work with us to do this, please? And then COVID happened and it got difficult. And now it's 3 years later and those urgent works still need to be done. And I think, and I think that's a really important point to remember, is that to delay this further delays those works and undermines the integrity of the building and also the viability of those businesses. So it's not about, you know, fidgeting around the edges while we contemplate every possible option. I think it's also really important to remind ourselves that, you know, as has been stated, the Fremantle Markets is a really, really important business for Fremantle. It's a unique business in Fremantle that meets the criteria of the commercial leasing policy that says it does not need to go out to tender. And I think, again, as it's been stated, to do that in a way that would actually delay them getting on with doing their business and improving their business for the well-being of our entire community, as well as the city's revenue streams that they provide, would just be stupid. So I'm really keen to support this. I'm really glad that we're close to resolving this at last, and I really look forward to the improvements being done on the building and the whole market's continuing to thrive.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Again, I won't try and replicate, and I thank Councillor Pemberton because I was actually going to say exactly the same thing about the lag and the fact that it was envisaged that we might have been able to get those major works done some 5 years ahead of the end of the lease. If we don't go down this path, my sense would be those works aren't going to happen until 2027 maybe, and I don't think we can wait that long. I don't think the store holders can wait that long. This whole process has been about risk and opportunity, and I don't see anything so far that persuades me that there are greater risks than there are opportunities in what we're being asked to approve today. I did just want to touch on the fact that, you know, I was around in 2008. I wasn't on council. I certainly followed the conversation, the debate, the very passionate debate at the time. And I had my view, and it probably lent a little bit in the same way that Philip Dawson, one of the storeholders, was talking about. And I thank you for making those statements here today, because it was sort of, you know, it was the sweet and sour of the history. I have always, more recently, said that we're not just being asked to consider the markets as if anybody could run them. Now, there have been quite a few comments from people in community and even in this chamber that anybody could do it. Maybe the city of Fremantle could do it. Yeah, maybe we should, you know, we might be able to double the amount of money that we make. I don't think so. I've recently rechecked out a number of markets around Australia on my travels, and the Fremantle Markets is easily the best that I've seen, and in fact, it's streets ahead of the ones that I've seen. If this was an easy thing to do, If this was just about collecting rent from store holders, then everybody would be doing it. We're not trying to be disparaging of the e-shed markets, but if it was that easy, the e-shed markets would also be going off, and I suspect they're struggling. If it was that easy, the massive market in the city in Victoria, in Melbourne, the massive market that's there would be interesting, and it's not. It's selling the same rubbish in every store, store after store. It just doesn't have what the Fremantle Markets has. And so there's that culture that goes to so much of Fremantle, and it's on show in the Fremantle Markets. And that is that sort of underlying issue of the risk and the opportunity of not proceeding with this with FMPL. If we were just purely thinking about commerciality, we'd probably wait till 2026 and we'd, kick out the markets and put in a car park because it'd probably make us more money. But the reality would be people would stop coming to Fremantle because the markets weren't there and our car park would go bust. So on paper, it might actually look like a really good deal, but there's that risk and opportunity. And it's not a good deal. We absolutely need the markets as part of our retail brand in Fremantle. We have said this time and time again, that the brand for Fremantle has to be about bespoke retailing. It has to be about things which are genuine and you can't buy somewhere else. Now, that happens in the Fremantle markets. It happens elsewhere in Fremantle. It is our brand, and we need to protect it. And so I'm totally supportive of this decision.
All right, just going back to the point made before about the without amendment, we also will strike out with Councillor Moffman's agreement the highlighted piece there. That's what the officers are suggesting. The business plan is still referred to as attachment 1, so there's probably no ambiguity as to what we're referring to. Yep. Okay, happy with that. Thank you. Right. Looks like I'm the only person left to speak, unless anyone else wants to jump in fairly quickly. Look, I'm just looking forward to tomorrow. I'm looking forward to getting on with the job of signing a lease, or CEO getting on with the job. I'm really looking forward to that capital investment. As many people have mentioned, this has been something we have been desperately worried about for a long period of time. COVID was definitely not great, as we were just getting to the point where we thought that might be on the horizon. But we all survived and we're here and we need to get on with it and we need to give the stallholders certainty. You have lives, your businesses are so much part of your lives. We know that you're trying to get on with your lives and that uncertainty is really, really tough. You are legitimate stakeholders in this. You are leaseholders, you are people in our community who have a say. And I think, as someone else said, if you'd all come in here and said it's terrible and you should put it out to tender, that would have been seen by many people as a fairly strong signal. So the fact that you haven't is also a very strong signal. So I'm really happy that we've got to this point. I'm really looking forward to voting for this item, and I'm really looking forward to getting on with the work of enhancing what is already one of our absolute tourism icons. And locals love it as well, I might add. So with nothing further, we will go to a vote. All those in favour of the item as amended, and those against. Councillor Kamada and Vusic against, and that is carried. All right, so I'll give us a little quick moment for people who might want to not stay for the rest of the meeting. I don't know, you're totally welcome. We'd love to keep you. You might have something else to do. Bring it out, bye. Give you a couple of minutes to get Lucy out of here, basically. Councillors, we're going to go next to the NOM, Councillor Pemberton's NOM on smoking, because we do have people in the gallery for that as well. So, Councillor Pemberton, I'll let you move that, and seconded by Councillor Lang. We might just shut those doors if we can. Thank you, Melody. Just for a little minute. So, Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank the Cancer Council for their contribution and interest. I really do appreciate the input. I was also contacted by South Metro Health team, who were also very supportive of this initiative and had some really useful input to say and share. And I'll lead to that shortly. I was going to share the feedback from the Cancer Council, but given that they're here, I don't need to do that, so that's fantastic. I wanted to share a little bit further kind of my reflections since first moving this at FPOL. One of the things that fascinates me is that we have a lot of private spaces that are smoke-free, that you can be guaranteed to have smoke-free environments, you know, this place, workplaces, you know, there's not a lot of public places outdoors where you can go and actually enjoy a smoke-free environment. And that's quite stunning to me, really, upon reflection. I mean, realistically, it's 5 metres within a door of a building, and that's pretty much it. And so to create some of our outdoor spaces, to allocate some outdoor spaces as dedicated smoke-free spaces actually seems like a really important public health service, I guess. I actually came into town on Saturday and I'd forgotten the Matildas game was on, and I sat down on the grass along with a whole bunch of families who were kind of picnicking on the grass and watching the big screen. And then I noticed that there was a man rolling a cigarette in front of me and preparing to smoke it. And he did have the good sense to stand up and walk away. But he only walked a couple of metres away, and the wind was going in a direction where it still came across the grass field. And of course, there was a lot of kids that were watching. He was standing sort of between the grass and the screen, and so in full view of everybody who was there. So in terms of exposing kids to seeing smoking and that sort of stuff as well, as the passive smoke, it was just kind of like, oh, is that really what we want when we were thinking about utilising this as, you know, a community space and our urban room where we could hold events and attract families and that sort of stuff. I really don't want to demonise smoking as well. You know, I've been a smoker for a very long time in my life and still occasionally, you know, dabble. And so it's not about demonising smoking. It's just about making sure people have an option when they don't want to be exposed to cigarettes, as well as was said, you know, for those people who are trying to avoid cigarettes because they don't want to be tempted, then having a place where you can go as well. So it's not about penalising people, it's about creating new social norms as well. And at the moment, you know, when you go out, you step out for your lunch break and get some fresh air from, you know, your workplace or whatever, you're kind of potentially exposed to smoking no matter where you go. And it's kind of nice when you can actually sit down and enjoy some fresh air and sunshine in between doing things and not have, you know, somebody's smoke wafting over towards you. And the changing attitudes around that is now really widely accepted, yet we're not actually facilitating people to be able to have, you know, to have that right of being able to choose a smoke-free environment, you know, unless you actually go to an alfresco dining area where it's outlawed, you know, then you can't actually go outside and have a smoke-free environment in Freo at present. As was said, there's some good work. This is happening more and more across Perth in different local government areas. The City of Vincent is being quite forthright on this and has quite a good initiative around their public health campaign around it. So it's not just about targeting smokers to find them or to shift them on and so on, but it is a proactive health message trying to encourage people to quit or make healthier options and that sort of stuff as well. And I think that that's an important aspect Through this process, I actually learned that Fremantle is the only local government authority in the South Metro region to not have a public health plan in place. And I thought that was really interesting. So there's 9 local governments in that South Metro area already, and 8 of those have public health plans. We're the only ones that don't. So I think, more broadly in regards to this, it's probably a piece of work that needs to be done by the next council in the next term, around actually looking at how we holistically build in health outcomes for our community. And I was in a meeting today having a discussion around transport specifically, and when you actually start to put a health lens over transport decisions, then you start to encourage, people moving their bodies instead of driving their cars. And likewise, there's all these kind of implications with how we as the council create a built environment that supports people to have good health outcomes. And I think this is a crucial part of that. Excuse me. Yeah, so I'll just go back to what I said at FPOL as well, which was when this was first suggested to me, it was proposed by a resident who I must apologise to because it's taken me 3.5 years or 4 years to get here. But he did suggest it as a tool that might be useful for the community safety team to have in order to manage antisocial behaviour, and I think that remains to be a valuable role that it can play. But more than that, I've become absolutely convinced that we need to provide some smoke-free public places in Fremantle outdoors, and to me this is the most logical place to do it.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton. Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, thank you. And I do appreciate Councillor Pemberton's notice of motion and the intention behind it. And I'm going to keep my mind open as I hear what other people have to say. But I think, while extremely well intentioned, there are a few potentially unforeseen or foreseen negative outcomes that could come from banning this in Montreal Court. And the first thing that I thought of was, what about staff that work here? I know there are some that go out the back for a quick smoke, and that would be on Walleyup Court and against this policy. And while they may be few in numbers, I mean, we do have staff that participate in that. There may be some that vape as well. So, thinking through how we can ensure that they have a place to enjoy their probably legally required breaks would be interesting. And then also, as even just community people, if they're smoking, they could literally just walk right across the road and then be in compliance of this. So we've just shifted what is a problem from here to right in front of the Fed or right in front of another business. So the practical use of applying this as a potential tool, people don't have to go very far to then be in compliance. So I'm just concerned about that. And then it is an outside area. It's pretty wide open, and yeah, people smoke, and some people are more considerate than others. And I would venture to say most people that I know that smoke are at this point very, very considerate of others, and to the point of really trying to make sure that they're not offending anybody by feeding their habits. But probably the last thing, in addition to those, that is really making me on the side of voting against this tonight is, like, there was a Falls Festival that was held right out in that square a while back, and if how this would interact, like, what if we wanted to do another big outdoor concert down there? Would people not be able to smoke or vape? And I think at that one there wasn't actually pass outs, but anyways, just having community events that some people may want to smoke at. And these are all perfectly, at least right now, legal things that we're talking about people smoking. We're not talking about things that are illegal. So people are, if they want to, or if they have the habit of, smoking, while us in this chamber may choose not to, other people may choose to, and doing it outside in a wide open area is probably the best place. So as of right now, for those 3 reasons, I'm really leaning against not supporting this. But again, I'll be happy to hear what other folks have to say.
Councillor Kamada.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Councillor Lorver has highlighted some of the unintended consequences that can come from bringing in such a rule. I am, like you, on the fence on this one. I think the intent is fantastic. I detest smoking, and one of the things that I'm really concerned about is I read in the report that for the first time since the 90s, smoking has increased in the younger generation. And that's a big concern for me. And as it was explained, vaping being a gateway drug for taking up tobacco is concerning. Of course, smoking is not a crime, and so you do feel that it can be the problem could be moved across the road, or they're obviously it's not an easy one. But I do remember, as many of us will, in the days when people used to smoke in nightclubs. And it was a big thing at the time to say, no, you're not allowed to smoke anymore inside a pub or a nightclub. And it's one of the greatest things that has ever been done, because you used to come home, your clothes stunk. Obviously, the passive smoking was a problem. And so I'd love to support this, and I may very well, but I'm also, I can see the other side of the issue. Thank you.
I just would remind members that this is something that would potentially, if it was supported, go out for public advertising and comment. So it's not a decision tonight to ban smoking in these areas. It's a decision to advertise a proposed local law. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, you would notice that I voted against this at FPOL when it came through, so I'll put the same spin on it that I did that night. And I'm fundamentally opposed to this, even though I should perhaps declare an interest for the Cancer Council lady. I do host a Cancer Council biggest morning tea each year for a good mate who died of lung cancer, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me not supporting this perhaps, but anyway, he's not around anymore. But look, this is, we know there's antisocial behaviour in the mall and in Walliup Court. And to me, this is what it's targeting to try, and they're the smokers. As I said at FPOL, it's in their DNA. They're going to smoke forever. You're never going to change them. They're going to sit down there and smoke. And if we've got to get a compliance officer to move them on, they're going to become more agitated. They're going to be mostly cause more of a problem trying to move them from Walliup Court. I mean, they can go and walk all the way along Adelaide Terrace down to, well, they can go and smoke down at the bus stop down by Little Lane. That's about 5 metres away from everything. So, is it really worth having to move these people on? Do we really want to pay compliance officers to do this? I mean, I understand all the smoking stuff, don't get me wrong, and we all do. And Councillor Lorber summed it up pretty well. I mean, it's still a free thing to do, and there's a lot of open space out there in that Walliup Court. Albeit, if there is a function that might be a little bit uncomfortable for some people, certainly doesn't worry me. And you just got to put up with some of these things in life. Policing is another one. Do we want compliance officers picking on the Frenchman off the cruise ship who smokes 50 a day and has done for 50 years when he lights up in Walliup Court or walks down High Street Mall? I mean, it just, I don't know, it just seems silly to me, all of this. So I won't be supporting it. It comes at a cost, comes at a compliance cost, comes at a signage cost. No one's going to read a sign about smoking. They only read the signs. Most people don't even read the parking meter signs. So, there's a lot of things there, and I think we could just do without it.
Thank you. So, yeah, I suppose I just want to pick up on a few points. There are, off the top of my head, 2 places outdoors at the moment in the CBD of City of Fremantle where smoking is banned, and that's within 10 metres of playgrounds. So this playground out here and the playground at the Esplanade Park as well. So if we accept that that is a reasonable proposition, that smoking should not be in an area where children are playing or are likely to be, I think for me, it is completely reasonable for us to also say that there are other areas where we believe that smoking should not be allowed. And when I refer to smoking, you refer to vaping as well. And for me, unlike Councillor Graham, I don't think this is about an enforcement issue. This is about societal and cultural norms about what is acceptable behaviour and not. And there wasn't enforcement as such, you know, to Councillor Kamada's point around, you know, being in restaurants and the like, or wherever it might be around smoking. It was just became that it was illegal, but it was about what was now acceptable behaviour. And even if you are sitting somewhere else and you're outside and someone lights up a smoke when you're eating, like that's actually, you know, pretty abhorrent behaviour these days. And I kind of reflected as well on my experience. And as a child, yeah, I travelled in motor vehicles with a parent or a grandparent smoking, and most probably enjoyed it at the time for the thrill of it. But when my kids now see someone smoking, it is a completely foreign experience for them, and they're, you know, somewhat confronted by it. And I think our environment here in Fremantle needs to be one that's welcoming to all. And yeah, just to make a point, most probably not, well, somewhat related to this. So I actually think that vaping is an absolute scourge on society, and as our governments have allowed us to go backwards in terms of addressing the issues associated with tobacco consumption by allowing vaping to creep its way in. And I think as a city, we can actually make the point that, you know, smoking and or vaping isn't something that we want to be occurring in our public spaces. And so I really look forward to seeing this advertised, and I am expecting that if this is passed and advertised, that we will get strong public support for this.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you. Let's not make this about dealing with antisocial behaviour. That is not what this proposal is, and I'm sure it's not the intent of Councillor Pemberton or anybody else. I guess I've been a little bit surprised by some of the comments. I didn't expect some of the comments that I've just heard. For me, this is really, really simple. It's about places where people congregate. You know, we want people to linger longer in places. And particularly, we want them to linger longer in places like the mall, in places like Walliup Court. We also expect people to linger at bus stops waiting for buses. We want people to linger at the beaches, at the playgrounds and the like. And these are all the sorts of places where smoking and vaping shouldn't be allowed. It should just be common sense. Anywhere where we want people to linger should not be an area where people smoke and vape. That's, you know, if you want to talk about what are we trying to achieve here, that is the beginning of making sure that all of those spaces are protected. Having done that, you know, people talk about the policing. Oh, it's going to be impossible to police. Well, it's no different to policing that or policing the fact that you can't drink in public. You know, typically policing is done when it is a particular problem at the time. You know, you're not allowed to smoke in al fresco areas, but they're not al fresco 24/7. If someone happens to smoke outside Gino's at 3 a.m. in the morning, they're not going to get busted for smoking in an al fresco area. Common sense prevails. So, you know, the reality will be there will be policing when it is required, and there won't be policing when it's not required. I was kind of interested, you know, Councillor Lorver said, well, you know, it's not going to work. They don't have to go very far and they'll be able to light up. Well, outside the National Hotel is a thoroughfare. It's not a place you linger. So for me, it just simply passes the test. the places where you can still go and have a cigarette or vape are not that far away. And, I'd encourage people that smoke and vape to actually walk a little bit further, probably, because it might be actually good for their health, to do so. But it's not that far away, as Councillor Lorber said. So I'm not sure why we would apply that test. The test is don't smoke and vape where people should be lingering.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I really liked this motion until I got to the sentence about the antisocial behaviour as a secondary benefit. And I think it's problematic, and we can't pretend that it's not, because the footprint of this proposed ban area is an area that we also are often dealing with antisocial behaviour. So I think as a council we need to be very careful that we're not creating an inadvertent issue of trying to move on a problem. And I guess I will be supporting this motion, and the reason I'll be supporting this motion is that, as the Mayor said, it now needs to go through a consultation process. And I would certainly hope that council officers do preliminary consultation with stakeholders around this precinct, service providers, and that we as a council, well, council I won't be part of, but the council that has to deal with this really seriously considers those consequences, and that we don't inadvertently exclude people from the city of Fremantle in creating non-smoking spaces like this. So just my alarm bell around the proposal. Other than that, I fully support it. Everything Councillor Sullivan has said, and Councillor Pemberton, that right to enjoy a public space, a beautiful public space without the wafting of smoke, is absolutely something that we should be pursuing. And I would hope that this became one of several non-smoking or smoke-free spaces throughout the city. I would question the totality of the footprint that's being proposed, and maybe that's part of that blending of how do we create smoke-free spaces without there being nowhere for people who smoke and may want to linger, not have to pace up and down footpaths because we've, removed public spaces. And we do need to remember that smoking and vaping are addictions. Once people are addicted, they need some empathy and support to remove that. They're not social kind of exiles. So, yes, I'm supportive. I thank Councillor Pemberton for bringing it, but I really urge Council to look at it in a very holistic way and make sure that the decision making is inclusive.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Vusic.
Look, I can remember, like many councillors around the table, the days of smoking indoors, and it was terrible, really, really terrible. And I remember on one occasion leaving a workplace because I couldn't take the smoking. My family, most of them smoke. I don't like it. I think it's always a balance for me. I really don't like telling people how to live. I like to see behaviour change more organically rather than to be a little bit somewhat more dictatorial in how we police things. I'm a little bit more in line with Councillor Graham on this issue. I don't like the judgmental aspect of telling people how to live too. So it's a big outdoor space. It's like saying to the strict vegetarians, when you go past some of our hospitality venues and the meat waffling through and they don't like it, where do we stop? So I think it needs to be balanced. I was in a particular place only a few weeks ago, and someone took out a cigarette, looked at us, or just not only myself, but we were in a group, and then they were polite enough to leave. Now, to me, that's awesome. That's just respect, and I'd like to see more of that organically between people rather than the police aspect of it. So as soon as you make a law, you've got to enforce it. Antisocial, I have only empathy. I don't like moving problems along. Although it has some merit, this particular motion, but I won't support it for those reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Archibald?
Thank you. Just very briefly, I did have a chat with the manager of field services because it will be in his area that it gets managed. And he did make the comment that he'd done a bit of chatting to other councils, and it does seem that in specific areas where people tend to, walk rather than it's a through thoroughfare for cars and things like that, that they are moving towards having smoke-free zones outside, particularly where people sit. And we've got, as Councillor Mofflin said, we've got the playground and that sort of thing. I wasn't very, like Councillor Groom, I was quite concerned about kind of the side intent of this, and I still feel a bit nervous about that. I would be much happier to see this go out to the public with the view that we're considering a smoke-free zone in these two areas, full stop, and not clutter it with other agendas, in the mix. So I think, as Councillor Mofflin said, people are moving to this sort of thing for outdoors as well, and I think that it is part of a general trend that we're going to see more and more of. But I think that should be our intent rather than trying to make it do other things for us. Let's solve the other problems properly instead of using these as levers. Yeah.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll be quick. People have talked about the enforcement issues. I don't see it that way. We have lots of signs around the place. No dogs on lead, no stopping, no standing, no parking, dogs prohibited, no jumping or diving down at the Swan River. And none of them are 100% effective. So it's not about enforcement and effectiveness. It's about, and I think Councillor Whitsitt is right, but it's actually about behaviour change. So the sign itself is a guide to behaviour. Whether or not people, well, 100% of people are not going to adhere to it, but even if a small minority do, we're on the right track. So I see this just simply as this is what we would prefer you not to do, and we're not going to be racing out, heading them off and fining them if they do that. But it's just simply a guide to behaviour.
So I'm going to support this going out for advertising. I thought back to Wallylup Court and the efforts we made prior to this area being opened up to really reset what the space was used for, and I desire very much to see people lingering, people sitting on the lawn, having their lunch every day in the sunshine. The school holiday activations, which have been a huge, huge success. And for me, they just feel so inconsistent with the idea of smoking around those activities. Now, how we design those activities and whether the whole of Wallylup Court is included, I think they're really interesting questions that can be part of that process of gaining public feedback. But, I have had the same experiences that other people have mentioned where, in the previous Matilda's game, someone's vaping right in the middle of all these teenage girls who are watching sport and getting really inspired about women in sport, and then somebody's got something that smells like a strawberry shortcake doll in the middle of them all, and you think this is just sending terrible, terrible messages, and we know it's in schools, and we know there's peer pressure, and someone's just right in the middle there, lying on the grass having a vape, and I think there's nothing we could do about that. Likewise, one of the holiday activations, we had the entrance to some kind of a maze. I think it was around Christmas, a Christmas maze, if we had a Christmas maze. And it was right where people sit on the benches and smoke, and look, maybe we should have, there were multiple entrances to the maze, maybe we should have moved it, but yuck, and you see kids, they are visibly repulsed by this up to a certain age. And that's that tipping point age. And that's what really worries me is We very clearly in that process, we said we want families coming to this place and we want young people to have spaces that they can hang out in without having to buy things and spend money, and that they can just hang out. And if those are the same spaces where they're passively inhaling smoke or, you know, smelling strawberry shortcakes and thinking that smells nice, you know, that can't be that bad, can it? That's just not something I can feel comfortable with. So the geographical boundaries on this, I think we can think about that. It's not the antisocial behaviour thing for me. It's the social behaviour that we want to have of people being in these spaces, and it makes it feel safer. You know, there's a lot of research that when you have a diversity of population in any space, young people through to old people, everyone behaves better. So the spaces we feel uncomfortable in are the spaces where we hurry through and we don't get that diversity because, you know, people don't want to linger there. They don't feel like they belong. So I can't describe, you know, High Street Mall or Wallylup Court as being places we would want to think of like that. We want to think of them as places for everyone. And to do that, we might need to change some of the sort of social norms around that. So I'm keen to get public feedback. I think it'll be really interesting to see how people respond to this going out to advertise. But the more I've thought about it, the more I just look at particularly, you know, the young people and the desires we had for this space and think, you know, we've got to change this. So thanks, Councillor Pemberton, for bringing it forward. I think we're ready to go to a vote. No, Councillor Pemberton, you're going to close, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. I think you've summed it up really well in a way I wasn't able. But I do want to just touch on one aspect I left off, which is the litter impact as well, which I think is something to put into consideration. And the other thing I wanted to remind everyone of, and I guess this particularly goes to Councillor Lorva's point around the events and festivals here, the Flyby nightclub was the first smoke-free music venue pub in WA. It was run by my brother-in-law at the time, and everyone was like, it's never going to work. It was before the laws came in and they got Healthway funding, and it was the first pub and licensed venue to go smoke-free, and it just went from strength to strength, and people flocked to it partly because they knew they could have a really great night out without being exposed to smoke. So I also thank you for making the point that this is not about making the law right here tonight. It's about putting it out to conversation with our community and investigating the issue further, and I think it's really worth doing.
All right, now I think we're ready to go to a vote. So all those in favour? Yep. And against? So Councillors Lorva, Vusic and Graham against. So that is carried. Go through to advertising. All right. Golly gosh, I think we're going to go back to the agenda as printed.
May we have a comfort break?
We may. We may. You can leave the room. It's fine. I am going to go back to planning, all the way back to planning. Councillor Jones, did you want to introduce PC 2308-6, or should I just move the office recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation. I don't wish to speak, but I believe there is an amendment.
So I get a seconder for that one. Councillor Lorva, and speakers on that one. Councillor Sullivan?
Might as well go straight to the amendment, I think. So I'll move my fairly extensive amendment.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Lang, I think. Someone with curly hair. And back to you, Councillor Sullivan.
I think the amendment's self-explanatory, so I won't go in great detail because it's quite long. But it essentially follows on from the amendment that I put back in December when we were first looking at this, and that was fairly well debated and the like. I know that other councillors have had an interest in this area as well, and I was just checking in with Councillor Archibald to see whether she felt we were still on the right path and the amendment is picking up on the right things. Obviously, Councillor Pemberton was also looking at the need for this amendment as well. So It really just picks up on what council has already decided. So I'll leave it at that and perhaps answer any questions in my summing up.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillors? Wow. All right. Sounds no, Councillor Archibald. Trying to find the button.
Trying to
Sure.
make a button work. Yes, look, I did go along to the workshop that was held on Sunday, and Councillor Pemberton also was there, but there was a great range of people, mostly from community groups, part of the Urban Bushland Council crew, and also the Community Wildlife Corridor groups. But the work that the University of WA and the other group did, I mean, it was some really interesting think tank type of stuff that came out of it. And I think it would be interesting for us. I did send through the link to the UWA person who was coordinating a lot of the work with the students. But you know, they're kind of trying to think out of the box a bit. But I think too that it's a great shame to miss the opportunity with such a large amount of land being considered to not kind of make sure the links go all the way through. The other component of it is of course, that when we get down to the urban zoning, you can also try and create a lot of smaller links. But importantly in all that will be trying to also make sure that the urban development really optimises, you know, what we're going to try and look for in the future in terms of housing. So I think it's a really exciting project all up. It links to Fremantle. It can have a link across to Hollis Park, which is really why I was quite interested in going along with the fact that it's interesting work. And of course we link to Clontarf Hill and then down into, you know, the rest of the reserve. So I was very pleased when I got up Monday and found that Councillor Pemberton and Councillor Sullivan both were right into putting an amendment together. So I just could sit and watch it all happen. And so I thank them for doing all that work, and I totally support what's been put together. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, I also want to thank Councillor Sullivan and Pemberton for putting these words together, because I really feel it captures the position that we did last December a little more all-encompassing than what was there before. Because we do, this is a rare opportunity, as Councillor Archibald said, to have that link really from, you know, the ocean to all the way out into other areas of Perth, all the way across, even across the Kwinana Freeway. So we're never going to see this again in this metropolitan area. So to have that continuous corridor would be really wonderful. And us making comment about even the areas outside of Fremantle, I think it only will help the city of Cockburn when they really go to bat to hopefully try to preserve this area. So I'm fully supportive of these amendments, and thanks again for putting them together.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the amendment? Did you want to close, Councillor Sullivan?
I'll just say one very simple anecdote. When the protests were on in the Belia wetlands issues, a couple of times I rode from my house in South Fremantle to the lakes, and I got to tell you, that was a horrible experience. You know, riding on some of those roads where people basically felt, yeah, what are you doing on the road? You know, this can be so much better, and I hope the government embrace the opportunity. I hope the city of Cockburn embrace the opportunity. There is plenty of scope for good development, and there is plenty of scope for the green corridors, and there's even scope to have a great Wally Hagan Centre and a recreated wetland in such an important area for the Aboriginal community and for the broader community. So I don't see why we wouldn't expect the state and the city of Cockburn to embrace this.
All right, I'm going to put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour of the amendment? And that appears to be unanimous. Back to the item as amended. Any further speakers? I'll put the item as amended. All those in favour? And that also appears to be unanimous. All right. Okay, so we're going to go to the F poll items. Councillor Archibald, are you happy for me to chair these, or did you want to? Yep. Okay. So I'll move the officer's recommendation for. I could probably check to see if people want to speak on 3 and 4 in the F poll items. We've got some speakers on 3 and 4, Fremantle Park and Stevens Reserve. It's like an auction. I'm going to go going. Yep. Nope. All right. So I might remove F poll 3 and 4 on block. Yeah, seconded by Councillor Mofflin. All those in favour? Thank you. I'll move F poll item 23085, the RAP, and get a second of that. Councillor Archibald. Councillor Groom has an amendment for that one, which very much reflects the discussion that was had at F poll. So thank you, Councillor Groom, for putting that into words. You'd like to move that? I think Councillor Pemberton would like to second it. That's just up on the screen there, and I'll let you speak to it.
Well, I hope it speaks for itself. And I wasn't at FPOL, but reading the officer's report, it was very clear to me that that was a glaring omission from the motion. And I think it's really critical we acknowledge how powerful the RAP process has been, and therefore the leadership of the working group in doing that.
Thank you. And I would absolutely echo those sentiments. And while we probably wouldn't put it necessarily in there, but also staff who have really engaged constructively through the work of the RAP. All right, so I might put the amendment to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And back to the item as amended. I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Councillor Groom, you've still got your light on. I'm going to look at the Audit and Risk Management Committee items and see if I can also put all of those on block. Did anyone? Yep, so I'll pull out 4. Any other bidders? Nope, so I'm going to move ARMC 1, 2, 3 and 5 on block. I'll get a seconder for that. Councillor Graham, all those in favour? That's unanimous. I'll move the officer's recommendation for ARMC 23084, Emerging Issues Report, seconded by Councillor Mofflin. Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. And this is most probably a little bit of a sneaky way to just acknowledge Councillor Groom, which I did do as part of the committee meeting. And I most probably could have done earlier in the meeting as part of elected member communication. I hope Councillor Thompson doesn't mind that. I just want to acknowledge as part of talking about the Emerging Issues report, the chair and leadership role that Councillor Groom has provided to the Audit and Risk Management Committee, but also particularly to the approach the city has taken to risk more generally. And I think it will be, as I said at the time, a legacy that she leaves, and it'll be something that will be missed as part of that committee. And I just wanted to say that in full council, and it wasn't something that was just left in the committee room. So thanks, Councillor Groom, for that, and appreciate the work that you've done on that committee over the last 4 years and 2 in the role of chair.
Thanks, Councillor Mofflin, and I too would like to flag the emerging risk that Councillor Groom's departure leaves to us as a council. It's been a fantastic shining light for doing things, better all the time. All right, we need to vote on that. All those in favour? Thanks. Okay, so let's go to us through ARMC. Again, the C items, if anyone would like me to pull any out to vote separately or to speak on. 2 and which number? Yep, all right. All right, so I'll move the officer's recommendation on 1. Get a seconder for that. Councillor Archibald, move to a vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Vusic against, and that's carried. I'll move item 2, seconded by Councillor Mofflin. Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. And just to speak briefly to this and acknowledge the work of the CEO over the last 12 months in the annual performance review and the feedback, I suppose, that was received from both elected members and staff as part of that performance review, I think demonstrates the level of confidence that those collective groups have in the leadership that the city has at the moment, and thank the CEO for his work over the last 12 months and look forward to another 12 to come.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. I agree with you there, and I think the only thing that stood out as being strange in those feedback reports was the repeated use of Mr. Dougal. We're not sure who calls him that, but it's not usually any of us or the staff. Apparently the consultant does. But yeah, totally agree. All right, I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? Yep, and against? Councillor Vusic against, and that is carried. I'll just keep going through these one by one. Statement of investments, I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Graham. All those in favour? That's unanimous. See item 4, schedule of payments. Move the officer recommendation, seconded by Councillor Lorber. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And the monthly financial report, I'll move the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. And all those in favour? And against? Councillor Vusic against, and that's carried. All right. This takes us to McCabe Street and then into the confidential agenda. So this is a nom from Councillor Groom, so I'll ask Councillor Groom if she'd like to move this notice of motion. Indeed. And if we have a seconder, Councillor Lang. Right, over to you.
So thank you. This notice of motion came about after Planning Committee and indeed Council considered proposals for 130 and 140 Stirling Highway and said, we can't really support those. I was really concerned that we sent a message to the community and to the state government as a result of those decisions that we were not open to development of those sites, when actually they are recognised by Council, as my understanding anyway, as really major development opportunities. And the reasons for our decision were about that, the really poor transport connectivity and our desperate need to resolve that. So I thought it was really useful that we make that statement really clearly and that we actually invite the state and our neighbouring local governments to join with us on that project, to do the planning, to resolve those barriers to development in those locations, give certainty to both the existing residents but also the landholders of those 2 large parcels and the other land in the area that has development opportunity, and to resolve the daily traffic problems that plague existing residents. So this NOM is about making really clear the Council's intent and aspiration for development to go there, and really clear what the barriers are to that, and that we want to be a partner in resolving them.
Councillor Lang.
Yeah, while we're heaping praise on Councillor Groom, it's my turn now. I was very excited to see this one come through planning. And one of the more exciting agenda items that I think we've seen for a while, to be honest. The fear that I started getting in planning when we had the Ford factory and then the One Steel factory items presented to us, all the reports about the modelling about traffic and the needing to put in 6 to 8 lanes at McCabe Street just to allow vehicles to get in and out of these new developments was quite a frightening prospect for that area. One of the residents was actually describing the site, saying that the towers will be a visible landmark on the coastline like Observation City is, and I immediately thought about Observation City and the forecourt that exists there, which is 8 lanes of traffic, and that's what was being proposed at McCabe and Stirling Highway, which is an absolute disaster in my opinion, and will cut off that precinct from the beach. and throughout the reports as well, it was reference after reference of cars and main roads, but nowhere in there was there any reference about the PTA or the railway. Obviously, there's a railway right next door, and what this motion does for us, I hope, is alerts the state government and more strategic planning towards activating or reopening the Leighton railway station, which would hopefully eliminate that eight-lane traffic nightmare that could exist. So this precinct presents such a great opportunity, I think, for Fremantle and the state government, who are all about transit-orientated development. And I think this is a site that could facilitate a TOD, and we've got developers on either side of the road that are actually ready to go and spend money and build there as well. So thank you, Councillor Groom, for bringing this one through.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, I'd also like to thank Councillor Groom for making the effort to do this. It's something we've talked about a great deal, but it takes a bit of effort to actually write it all down. I attended most of the sessions of the Future Fremantle workshop last week, and just by the way, it was, I think, excellently organised and run. But I was fortunate enough to sit at a table for like a day and a half with with the senior transport planner on the team and one of the senior designers on the team, and I frequently raised the fact that some of the most important issues in the area are outside of the Future Fremantle area, and they acknowledge that they're very aware of that, and that the spillover effects, particularly of transport, all the way to Perth, in fact. I mean, I think there's an acknowledgement that the railway line all the way to Perth is a problem, and in time needs to be either sunken or raised or something happen. But I think that I welcome this initiative, but I think I ought to say that a lot of these issues are actually being discussed, but they're just not being discussed with us.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. And again, like the others, I thank Councillor Groom for putting this forward. And I would just explain, that this is one of the ones that I probably wanted to put forward myself. But I think realistically, given my outlier role comments in the two major developments in that area, I really wasn't in a position to be putting forward something that talked about having a conversation with government about the development in the area that brought the community along with us. So I thank Councillor Groom for initiating it. But it is, and it has been, an area of interest for me for decades now. And I want, Councillor Groom and I discussed, what the kind of like boundary of this should be. How far do you go? And I guess that's really the point of my amendment, which I'll move in a moment. That, like Councillor Jones, I actually attended all 5 days of the Future of Fremantle workshops. And one of the points that I made multiple times was the sheer frustration that once again a boundary had been put around a conversation, a project, and that boundary didn't include the resolution of the transport networks. It didn't include the east-west linkages between community on the riverside and community on the ocean side. It didn't include all of those things that have been so hard fought for and discussed in community for as long as I've been involved. And so for me, this motion does need to be expanded. I feel we need to be bold in what we request, and I feel we need to honour all of the work that has been done by previous communities on projects like the Vlaming Parklands, on the need for resolution in all of these areas, and even things like the Leighton Beach area and the like. So I've drafted an amendment. Councillor Groom mentioned that she's not quite sure about it yet, and she wants to hear the debate, so I'll move it and then just go into a bit of detail.
Right, if there a seconder for Councillor Sullivan's amendment? Councillor Lang. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. essentially what this amendment does is says there are two nodes of development in this area. Ours is the McCabe Street area. The other node of development is what I loosely call South Cottesloe, which includes the old McCall Centre, which we put in a commentary about. But it also includes the Wellington Street underpass proposal, which has been on the books forever, and the relocation of the Victoria Street station to Wellington Street. And these two projects, these two nodes, are basically include the Vlaming Parklands elements, and they include the Leighton Foreshore elements. And there are aspects about, for example, McCabe Street. You know, the future of Fremantle process, if it must have been said 100 times, if not more, that the Leighton station should be moved back to, sorry, the North Fremantle station should be moved back closer to the old North Fremantle station. And that actually makes it a lot further away from McCabe Street. And so without the reopening of the Leighton station, which is right opposite, we don't actually have a TOD. We don't even go close to having a TOD. And it actually puts, you know, the problem not only in the basket of it's really hard right now, it'll actually be even harder to resolve. And so the location of Wellington Street Station is just as important to McCabe Street as whether or not we, you know, reopen Leighton. Leighton would be great, but if we don't get that, there needs to be a link between McCabe Street and the Wellington Street Station should be on the south side of Wellington Street, where it can be linked through the Vlaming Parklands to this development. So that's just one of the reasons why these aspects are linked together. But mainly my proposal is to say this is a request to government. It's not a, you know, we're not holding a gun to their head. We're requesting government do this. We've already had conversations about both sites collectively with the town of Mosman Park and the town of Cottesloe. And it may well be, and I'll still be disappointed after 40 years, it may well be that the state say, no, we're not going to do that body of work. But let's be bold and let's broaden out the conversation and let's ask for this body of work that absolutely needs to happen. I'll just say finally, one of the things that all of the consultants at Future of Fremantle said is, you know, they were slightly, as every other study, even the Bridges process, have sort of said, saying, you know, we're kind of sorry that we're not looking at these broader issues. But they said, but we think our proposal for Future of Fremantle will make it absolutely necessary for the state government and the Department of Planning and Transport and everything to resolve these issues once and for all. And realistically, they might do that down towards the Future of Fremantle site, but they also need to do it all the way up to McCabe Street and all the way up to Wellington Street, because it's one project. It's not a series of projects. So I hope you support the amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. On the amendment. So I'll speak a little bit, and I'm a little bit, I've got a discomfort, and I guess it's probably best to share it and see where people sit with it. We have two active landowners with live proposals in the McCabe Street precinct. We have a desire in the future to see a much broader Leighton Parklands approach. And I just don't know sort of strategically whether we're better to lead with the bit that is most prominent in a decision-making piece in our approaches to WAPC, or to talk about, you know, some process that will encompass a whole bunch of future envisaged stuff, that we want to design a process that can take in the now and the longer term future. So I don't step away at all from the longer term future and the broader Leighton Parklands plan, But I worry that if we want to do something that very specifically looks at this node at this point in time, where we have two very significant developers kind of knocking on the door, that any dilution of that might not get us the immediate sort of action that we require on that McCabe Street node. So I support the intent, and it's kind of, I almost wonder whether there's a version of this that says, and it's a top advocacy priority to do all of the Leighton Parklands stuff, but we don't necessarily want it to be caught by the same mechanism that gives us immediate and fast kind of attack on that issue that's not going to go away because we've got significant developers with significant interests. So I'm pretty caught in the middle on it, like the intent, not sure of the strategy. Councillor Logger.
Yeah, I really do see the value of attacking this as one whole continuous project. It makes absolute sense to me. But I've been here a little over 10 years, so I don't have the history that a lot of people do. But what I've seen is governments tend to like to fix something even if it creates a problem somewhere else, and then fix that problem, and then fix another problem, and down the track. And so looking at the intent of both what's Councillor Groom and Councillor Sullivan's amendment, if we could sort out McCabe Street, I would be extremely happy, because then we would, if there is a problem down there at in South Cottesloe, they can sort that out next and on down the line. To get it all done at once seems to be a bit unrealistic, just given what I've seen happen in the past. So I'm happy to go with whatever is approved, because I think this is very important, and thanks to Councillor Groom for putting it together.
Councillor Groom.
Yeah, I think I actually am inspired by Councillor Sullivan's call to be bold, and we've so often turned around to the state government and said, why'd you leave that bit out? That probably we need to walk our own talk. And if they say, no, it's not in, well, they say, no, it's not in. Like, it's still, we haven't over-laboured that point. It's included as a scope. They can redefine the scope. It doesn't change the things we want out of the process. I'm kind of inclined to accept that as a reasonable starting position that supports our constant kind of badgering about you can't do things in isolation. So it's consistent with our messages to the state government about other projects. That's where I've landed. Thanks, Councillor Sullivan.
Councillor Moughlin.
Yeah, I'm most probably inclined to support as well, in the sense that, yeah, if you don't ask, then you don't get. And I would have also thought that, as part of those conversations, we're simply asking to engage with WAPC, Town of Cottesloe and Town of Mosman Park about this. And if there were then elements which needed to be prioritised, let's do it. But we can have it as part of a bigger picture.
Alrighty. So we got a vote on the amendments. Councillor Sullivan, did you want to close? Or Councillor Thompson? Hello.
Madam Chair, I agree with what's been previously said. I just wonder whether a slight adjustment to that might be after the words Town of Mosman Park, to ascertain their view. So in other words, it's basically it's a fishing expedition to see whether they're actually interested. Okay, that's fine. But for me, that's yeah. Okay, I'll leave it.
I guess just by way of context, we've had a number of meetings with those councils, and gone to collectively see stakeholders. I think they are interested in something. What form that takes is TBA. Yeah. All right.
So I will just responding to the comment that we really need to see the fix at McCabe Street, and we need it now, and that is true. But if the government doesn't broaden out the, I guess, the conversation about what the fix needs to include, then we will end up making decisions that will significantly reduce the amount of development that can go there. And we will probably end up with a main roads solution. And that frightens the absolute bejeebers out of me. So that is why it does need to be broadened out. And the same is true to the north. There is huge scope for local governments to embrace the strategy of infill development. But unless they're properly serviced and unless the state government does the planning work with the local governments to find ways of properly servicing these transport orientated developments, these infill developments, then we are going to see them basically not live up to their potential. And I can't accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. You might have convinced me. I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? And that's, I think, unanimous. There you go. Add back the item as amended. Any further discussion? Councillor Jones.
I'd just like to make one comment I made at the Future Fremantle workshops, and that this peninsula must be some of the most desirable land in the whole of Western Australia, with the river on one side and the beaches on the other, and yet the state government seems to just everything they want to do is to mess it up, And it came out clearly from the Future Fremantle people that they still see main roads as a major issue in all their discussions, their planning. For the first time, I actually saw a statement that the plan is to bring Curtin Avenue on a bridge over the top of North Fremantle Town Centre to land at the Stirling Bridge. I was actually told by a senior planner that is the plan at the moment, and there were some dotted lines on the map that didn't show a bridge, it just showed a ground level dotted lines that going through where the car wash is and the boab trees. There's been various comments made in the past that we've got to get somehow from Curtin Avenue to Stirling Bridge. It's the first time I've actually seen it said the plan is to put a bridge over North Fremantle Town Centre. Maybe not for 40 years, maybe 30 years, but that's currently the plan. And comments were made that the Future Fremantle board, whatever they're called, the body, actually are keen to get the power of main road reduced in the same way that we are. So I thought it was quite interesting that they're not actually at the party. They still want to build a freeway from IKEA down to Rockingham through the middle of Fremantle, and one way or another. So it just is amazing that the way the state government's agencies look at this peninsula is as a transport corridor. It has got the potentially most expensive land, I would think, in the western suburbs, river views, ocean views, and so on. But none of that seems to be acknowledged or treated as a priority. So it's quite strange to me.
Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, just briefly, just because I also was at the Future Fremantle Week of Extravaganza, and that North Quay area was repeatedly called maybe the world's largest cul-de-sac, or at least Western Australia's largest cul-de-sac, and getting people in and out of there is a huge, huge issue. So as much as we can do to support public transport up and down this corridor, we absolutely need to. It's interesting to me that I'll just digress for 30 seconds and then I'll talk to you guys later afterwards, that there was a room full of people over 5 days, all focused on what's going to happen there in North Quay. And the only reason that the decision from Westport was made to move the port was because of the traffic. And so now they're looking at how do we get 60,000 people in and out of there, and they haven't actually gone back and said, well, what does that do for the local traffic? So it is a very big challenge, and I look forward to seeing how those kind of things get forward. It's almost moving the port is now to have the development versus that, like we actually need to. But regardless, whatever we can do to bring it back to what's on the screen to support public transport up and down the corridor will only have huge benefits for whatever happens.
Thanks. So I might just speak before you close, Councillor Grimm. I mean, I have done some of the early advocacy work on this precinct off the back of the two MRS amendments in the area. And I guess my perception is that it's just not really been seen. You know, there was all the work that was done years ago. You know, there was controversy, then there was development. Everyone agreed that development was a pretty good outcome down at Leighton, and then everyone kind of moved on and forgot about it. So there's almost this kind of, you know, I know the town of Mosman Park has started calling it the, you know, the Western Suburbs laydown area, or the, you know, gravel pit, or the, because really it's just being used in a very transactional way. And it is a massively underutilised area. I guess our perception in the early engagement that the mayors have done is that once you point it out to people, they're kind of like, oh, hang on, you know, this is a whole generation of people who don't remember Save Leighton. They don't remember all of that context. They don't know there was a station at Leighton. And we remember that, but when we bring it back to them, there is, I think, a warm kind of interest in, wow, who knew this was here? So I am somewhat optimistic. I think it is absolutely the sticking point that everyone has identified is anything with the name authority in their title, whether that's PTA or main roads or, you know, those very entrenched structures of government will be the hardest ones to convince. And that's where we do need a very specific process and some, I guess, will at senior levels of government to challenge some of those norms. So thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Grimm.
You've all closed very elegantly for me, so we could move to a vote, I think.
Certainly. I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. That brings us to the end of the normal agenda. So we have no urgent business or late items. So I'll move that we go behind closed doors for the confidential item. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? All those in favour of going behind closed doors for the confidential item? And those against? Oh, sorry, I can't see. Yeah, okay.